I have the bean juice right here.
Mm.
Good evening, everybody. It's midweek geek, and as you can see, we've got a full table here. We've got five of us raring to go to have a chat on this topic. One of Saxish's choices. He's given us a list of topics to talk about. And I thought this one would be a good one tonight. And it's about creating villains and what makes a villain. How you make the villain sometimes sympathetic, or do you make them sympathetic, or what do you do to make a villain? And only Saxius could really come up with this topic because he is our villain. I know DK started off as the stereotype villain, but we've got a real villain with us in Saxius. DK, you don't.
I'm only as villainous as the world needs me to be. But deep down, I'm not the hero you. I'm not the hero you want. I'm the hero you deserve.
Elfbait with us, who only 20 minutes ago sent me a message saying he wouldn't make it.
What can I say? I can't stay away.
and that was quite villainous of you, wasn't it, Elfbait? And we've got Sean Major's Musings with us, who I believe is away making coffee at the moment, so he will know that.
No, very villainous.
He's back.
He left and then just had such villainy.
Is it villainous coffee?
But he's only
it's president's choice, so decide for yourselves.
Oh well. Depending on the country you live in, president's choice is pretty evil.
Sean's only villainous when he's in the guise of Ace-Eric. If he's in the guise if he's in the guise of the kindly old mage, though, he's everything a villain isn't.
We found out a couple of weeks ago he does an excellent Saxius impression.
Yes.
So, don't worry, Saxius is German. He's practicing his villainy.
He's not German.
He's Norse. It's all the same.
No,
your jokes are all the same, DK.
Well, yes. English, Irish, what's the difference, right?
Dem's fighting ways.
Considering half of Scandinavia remained neutral in World War II, I think they'd say that there's a lot of difference.
I've got to say, at least you didn't say it was Scottish, Irish, all the same. Now that would be
but the Scottish are just discount Irish anyway, So
I've lost all the stream already.
Okay.
Well, there's us Americans who just
don't worry,
Australia and just dinner on.
They got out while the getting was good. But
I want to say hello to everyone in chat before we do it. I want to say hello to Shadow and Sun. Hello to Hungar the Starvarian, who of course was very generous on Friday. That's why quite a few people are in green at the moment. Gunpeld Slan is here with us as well. Ranger Lemure is about, and we have. Have I mentioned Halakar? Oh, we have Halakar as well. There's Halakar. Oh. So,
and Omanal.
Greetings, everybody. And Omanal's lurking in there. And Ian McDonald is lurking in chat as well.
Speaking of Scottish.
I can't do a Scottish accent. Even though I only live a few hundred miles from Scotland, my Scottish accent is absolutely atrocious.
Speaking of generosity, Hungar just gave you 5 memberships.
He's done it again.
Yep.
It doesn't come up when you're in StreamYard. You don't see it. It doesn't come up again.
It's because I have my phone on my side and I'm looking at the chat. That's how I can spot it. We need to get Hungar on at some point.
We do. Thank you, Hungar. You are a star as always. That is very, very generous of you. I do wish StreamYard would tell me when people have done that, because I can see super chats and I can see those sort of things appear, but I can't see anything to do with giving other people memberships. So.
I think it's an exclusive YouTube thing. Maybe that's why. I don't know.
Very possibly.
The YouTube overlay.
Yeah, true.
So thank you, Hungar. Right, our topic tonight, as chosen by Saxius, is villains and villainy. It's how we make our villains. Do we try and get the players to have sympathy for the villain in some way, or are are they just purely villainous? How do you make a villain to be possibly relatable? How do you make the party want to kill the villain? That's or deal with the villain, or how do you make the party stop and think how they deal with the villain? Hopefully, all these are topics are going to be covered tonight. And Saxius, I'm gathering. I guess that as it was your choice, this is something. Of course, it's villainy, so it's going to be your forte, isn't it? It's going to be your forte. And you've already got that grin, you know. Oh no,
the glasses are coming off.
No, oh god.
Yeah.
I will let the girl go for 1 million Deutschen Marken.
Yeah. Your story is only really ever going to be as good as the villain that you have in it. Now, whether that is a direct opponent, the typical BBEG, or whether it is some form of obstacle that the players have to overcome, and it has to be something that is not just, a case of like it's a bunch of hit points and a bunch of stats and abilities, just overcome it. That's your generic encounter. A villain is something that stands out. It has a name. It has more than just numbers and abilities. It's got a story. There's life that's been breathed into it. There's a purpose behind it. And the most dastardly and evil of them all are the ones where, when they explain their reasoning, when you understand and you learn of their history, suddenly it's not just a black and white, us versus them. It suddenly it makes sense. Having players sit and look at each other and go, he's actually making sense. It's not the insane babbling of a lich that's 1,000 years old that has lost his mind. It's someone who has very methodically gone over the thoughts, the process, the steps, the reasoning, and it's been reinforced several times over. That is a villain where there is a drive behind them. More than just the mere ambition of conquest. It can be for something greater, to upheave a nation out of poverty and famine. But in order to do that, so in order to bring up the people, you need a goal, you need something, and you need drive for that. And there are many. For anyone who studies history, it's very easy to find such information, such insights, such inspirations easily, and that is some of the things that really makes a villain stand out. It's the thing that the players will walk away knowing that if they succeeded, then it is a memory that they will carry on with a bright torch for many, many, many years, if not their entire lives. And if they fail, it is one of those moments where they will sit back and go, that is something that they will remember, because it wasn't just the downfall, to the DM that caused their demise. No, it was Strahd, the evil overlord of Ravenloft, or it was Valdimir the Destroyer, the leader of the Red Hounds, and anything that you can make up for there. But anything that's got that drive, that's got that history, that's got that insights.
Le Comte de Fenelique.
Yeah, if it's got that sort of background, that deviousness behind it, then that can really make a villain, stand out. And that's where, so for me, it really sort of centers around it, because a villain is going to be a center point for many, many players, and it's going to be the thing that they are going to be opposing, or at the very least building up to oppose. That's my beginning take.
Pardon me while I eat on stream here. I was just given a hot oatmeal cookie.
I would say I will slightly disagree with Halakar here with the whole that night from A Knight's Tale. He wasn't trying to. The things he was doing in that film were not to uphold tradition. He was just a heel. He was just doing it because this young upstart was basically showing him up, and it was a bruise to his ego. It was his vanity that would not allow this. So he's not like blinded by his sense of tradition. He's just vain. So he's just a foil to a virtuous hero. But how I would do a villain, and I think when Saxy said a story is only as good as its villains, I think a story is only as good as its heroes are heroic and its villains are villainous. And the best kinds of villains are the ones that are tragic. For instance, since he brought up history, let's look at Vlad Tepes. Now, I play in Lion and Dragon, as I've said many, many times. In the canon Lion and Dragon story, Vlad Tepes, after he is betrayed by his brother Radu, he invokes the powers, the dark powers of not Barovia, of Wallachia, to bring him back to seek vengeance on those who betrayed him and abandoned him to his fate. Now, up until that point, he was an extremely pious, very virtuous, although somewhat brutal, maybe by the standards of even by the standards of the time. But you have to consider the Ottomans were even worse. And you notice that as he goes further and further and further down his path to save his homeland, he becomes more and more extreme. He becomes more and more paranoid until finally he breaks. And what made this tragic is the fact that it could have all been prevented. Everything that he did was the result of an oppressive foreign power trying to take his home away from him. And he was trying to hold this together. And his flaws was that he trusted his brother too much because he needed to trust his brother. And that trust betrayed him. And it drove him to madness. And we can see in this villain that this could have happened to us. But the thing is, you have to show this villain. Like I'm hopefully a player or a friend of mine wants to run a Vlad style game, but I told them you have to show them the players working under Vlad when he was virtuous and then fighting against him when he's a villain, because then they will see just how far he had fallen. And that will emphasize that anything he could offer, anything that chaos or evil would give to them is hollow, because look at what it did to Vlad. So a villain is not just there to show how evil they are or how bad the world is, but it's to show how virtuous the heroes are. Heroes are not infallible, because that's what makes them relatable to the villain. But what makes them better than the villain is the fact that they don't fall to temptation like the villain does. That's what separates them. You're supposed to use villains to lionize heroes. And that's what I think makes them more relatable. But there's also the chance that they can come back. But they usually don't. That's my 2 cents on it anyway.
Okay. Who wants to have a go next on their take on villains?
When it comes to villains, this is actually one of my weak spots in games. My fantasy worlds have often been considered to have way too little conflict built into them because I don't have a lot of villains. And one of my problems is that I don't play villainous very well. So, it's because I'm too much of a good guy. So I don't have a ton to say on my take on villains. I mean, what I like to see in villains in TV and movies and books and stuff. I have to admit that I'm getting a little tired of the sympathetic villain, and actually kind of really look for villains that are just straight up villainous nowadays.
Somebody you have no qualms with butchering.
Yes. Yeah. I'm just tired of every great villain being given some sort of horrible, heartstringy backstory now. Like the more recent spat of Disney movies, for example, where they've gone through and analyzed their villains. The only one that they've done so far up to date that I haven't hated was the interpretation of Cruella. And that's only because they played off of something in world to where the actual villainy was fake and the character wasn't ever actually a villain. And the way they framed it was done really well. It's mainly because they used a sort of a punk rock framework on that. But, when you look at like, the Maleficent villain, for example, and I'm going to quote a lot of Disney. I've raised a bunch of kids, so and was a Disney fan before that. But Maleficent, they took a great villain who had enough motivation as it is, being an arrogant fairy queen and getting slighted, and then gave her this backstory that, while modern and poignant, I felt just really overcorrected.
It was it was just hollow.
Well, it wasn't so much hollow. I mean, if you watch the scenes and you know what they're analogizing there, it's horrible. But I don't think it needed to be done. Like Darth Vader, I liked him a hell of a lot more before I watched the prequels. He was a much more interesting villain to me before I saw Anakin do his whole whiny Anakin thing, and
well, that's a flaw in the storytelling, not necessarily the concept.
That is true. I mean, we all knew that he used to be a good guy and became a bad guy, and we were really cool with that. I think sometimes you're right. The storytelling is the problem. Anyways, like I said, I don't have too much of a dog in the fight when it comes to what I care for in villains and how I perceive villainy. I just don't really feel the need all that often to have sympathetic villains that people grab onto. Sometimes it's okay to just have somebody that you feel like punching in the face.
Yeah.
I'm pretty much agree with everything that's said in that, all of it is valid. But when approaching a game idea, I mean, conflict is what drives the story. It doesn't have to be with a villain. Right. And what I love is actually pitting players against like-minded type characters, lawful goods coming into conflict with other lawful goods. That really bakes their brains. It's like, why are we fighting this guy? We should be friends. But your conflict, your goals are at odds. So you will come into conflict. As far as the classic hero villain concept, it's always great to have a villain. But for game terms, there's usually no bones about, oh, well, he's a bad guy. Of course, we're going to take him down. And most players are murder hobos, and they'll just take anybody down anyway. So,
I mean, my as far as making villains have the odd moral in there, I tend to lean very much towards most of my villains are doing villainy simply for the sake of it. It's one of those things where I will I like to occasionally drop in a villain that can be reasoned with and possibly felt sorry for, but not very often. I mean, as Elfbait said, I think it gets a bit overdone. I do like the black and white. This is one side, this is the other side. Almost pick sides.
I think in games, those work a lot better sometimes. If you have too sympathetic of a villain, it's really easy for the players and the game to get bogged down in trying to figure him out.
Philosophical debates and
But that's great too. If people leave the table after even an afternoon of philosophical debate about what to do about the villain, and they're smiling and had fun, then the game was a success.
It leads to like to fatigue almost. Like we come here to play. Like it's once in a while that's good, but if you keep doing that, players are gonna if you stop every time to figure out a villain, you're gonna waste time, and most of the time you just want to go into a dungeon and kill things.
I think we do need to specify that when we're talking villains, we're not just talking about every enemy you're going up against.
Right.
It's going to be the big named encounters, the big showdowns people. So you don't need to have a tragic story for the orc chieftain or for the bandit.
You don't.
That's perfectly fine. Like, they can just be bandits. They can be out there doing horrible things. And it can be simple black and white. No, we're talking villains. Big named characters. People
like the mountain that rides, basically.
Satch's out there. There's a bandit chief watching the stream, going, "What am I? Sliced cheese to you?"
Yes, yes, sliced cheese to me. I shall put it on my grilled hamburgers.
You will be sliced beef in a second once the fighter gets his hands on you.
Actually, a good example from. Oh, actually, I don't want to derail things too much. Let's get to our points first, I guess, right?
I want to finish what I was about.
Yeah, I kind of
right.
I drove us all off.
I mean, I don't think I'm particularly good at creating villains. I like to play existing villains and just sort of develop what's in the text already. And I thoroughly enjoyed running the original Ravenloft with Strahd because he was, in D&D terms, probably the first villain that you could have a little bit of sympathy for, but you had a purpose and he had to be destroyed for you to get out of there.
Well, the great thing about the original Ravenloft as well is, especially if you're doing the tarot reading at the beginning, is he gets a very clear motivation that is given to the DM to run. And that's a major factor of developing any antagonist, whether or not they're villainous, is what do they want? What are they fighting for? And does that conflict with the players or not? Sometimes it might not be. They might come along and say, hey, I want to accomplish this. And the players could say, oh, well, hey, we'll help you with that. And there goes the conflict. Now the villain is no longer a villain.
I mean, I like to show a villain early on as well. Sometimes earlier than if I'm running a published adventure, sometimes I'll just show the villain a little earlier than would be normal. When I ran my recent Summerland campaign, the villain appeared in the very beginning, but the party at that point weren't fully aware that he was the villain. They quickly realized it, but that was just sort of to set things up in the world. But I know DK knows the villain I have had most fun in playing, and I took him away. Vampire. Yeah, I took him beyond what was in the material, and I really got dark and dirty with him, and I put him in very early on, and scared the PCs into effectively working for him. But there was no way on earth you could ever feel any sympathy for him whatsoever. He's not a figure that deserves sympathy in any way, shape, or form, apart from the fact that he's been stuck in an asylum for 200 years. But he fully deserved it. You quickly learn, the players learn that he fully deserves it because he is an absolute. He's
reprehensible human being.
Human. He is without any form of. There's no way of getting him to change his ways or anything like that at all.
He's gone.
Villain.
He's gone. Yeah. He is. Well, he's probably demonic at that point. He's fully renounced his humanity. He's gone.
Yeah, he is. He's basically an ancient vampire who has been imprisoned for many years because he was too outlandish for the aristocracy of the French Revolution. His sexual desires went way beyond what even they would allow, and his demands. And he was pure evil, but highly manipulative, very powerful. But I thoroughly enjoyed playing him because he was just so disgusting, and he had and the voice. As you know, DK, how delighted he was to meet warm-blooded individuals for the first time in 2 centuries, and how he would enjoy the contact with their warm flesh.
Well, I think that jumps into another aspect of what makes a good villain is the performance, which can be a lot of fun.
Yeah. I like the performance side of it. I do like the performance side of a villain.
It's one of the reasons I always love plenty of Imperial officers when I run Star Wars. It's
like
get your bad British accent on in your officialdom.
Yeah. I mean, like there is something to be said though about like I kind of want to at some point run a hopefully that this will happen where like say because I've had a situation where the PCs in one of my games took a fort and captured an NPC bandit, and he's become a high level, like a 4th level thief for the party and a really capable assassin and disguiser, and he's fully adopted their worldview and he's not gone native, but you know he's a turncoat for the good guys, you know, and I kind of want the opposite to happen, where just through slander or a slight or an intractable worldview, an NPC who was once a dear ally that the players liked just turns on them. And what makes it, what I'd like to do is to be able to just hammer home that he's not bad. It's either like they just philosophical differences or they were just so cruel to him and he becomes he had fallen so far to evil that makes the players go back and say, if only we had been better, we could have stopped this. And because they can entirely understand why he's doing what he's doing.
That's dependent on the players, though, falling into that.
That is true.
I mean, whereas if you want to give a trigger that's independent of the players, like the fact that they've taken in this reformed assassin, you know, the assassin could have done something unforgivable that this other NPC's like, no, I'm not having anything with it.
Yeah.
Then there you go. That's your jumping off point.
I mean, I had a paladin in one of my campaigns that insisted that he would find something good in all the villains and all the monsters that they came across. So he tried to, well, at one point he adopted a hobgoblin and basically took him under his wing and basically throughout almost an entire year in real life dedicated into like trying to get this hobgoblin to slowly understand that the way that he was raised and the way that these worldviews of supremacy was actually very wrong, and that, you know, there was more to it than what he had been raised up to understand from the hobgoblin society. And that was an achievement at the very end where the hobgoblin eventually sort of renounced that, you know, I'm not the killer that I was before, but there were many times throughout the campaign where the player and the paladin were singled out and gone like, are you insane? He is a murder machine. He is trained from birth. He's a Spartan of murder, of this and that. He believes that, you know, his soul will go off onto another world where he will become another foot soldier in a grand war, and so on and so on. And it took, again, a lot of willpower. He was able to prove that there is one way for a villain to be redeemed, though it took a lot out of the paladin, and it took out a lot out of the player in real life. So it was something I told the player, you know, don't do this all the time, because many characters are evil, especially, and he picked one that had been raised from birth to believe this way. Not that he was a villain per se. It was more that, you know, it was a sign that, you know, there was a form of redemption. There was a change of it. But Mage is absolutely right. You know, it's the composition of the players that you're also dealing with, because if the players decide that we don't want to invest anything into understanding our enemy,
that's true.
Bad guy,
I mean,
good guy, smash. And then,
I mean, I actually, when I was playing an Aaron the Pedantic's OSC game, where I didn't see it an NPC villain. I saw a player character villain, where like he would charm a poor farmer and use him as a guinea pig. Like, we'd killed a minotaur. I had this gnarly looking armor on it, and I was nearly about to put it on myself on my cleric, and then someone else pointed out, hey, dump some holy water on it, because in his game he homebrewed that law, when met with chaos, would have violent consequences. So when the holy water hit the armor, it just started sizzling, and I'm like, I'm not touching this thing. And then the guy because he was like, we want to get magic items. We want to make the party stronger. So he forced his slave, for lack of a better word, to put the armor on. And he started transforming into a minotaur. Now, we stopped it. but not before it mutated, and through long series of events, eventually the creature got too strong for his dominate to work, so he let him go. And I said, dude, if you let this thing go into the wild, he's going to rampage and kill people, or the clerics are going to get his hands on him and just kill him. So I'll take him in, and I'll see if I can't restore him. And Aaron said, when you get to 7th level, you can do this, but the game kind of petered out after that. But I took care of him. He was like my little Quasimodo. And I did it partly on a level. I wanted to minimize the harm that this wizard was doing, because he was like killing people and taking their hands for necromantic purposes. He was dominating the minds of innocent people. It's like, not a good guy. Not a... To say he was neutral...
Speaking of not good guys, we've been joined on the stream by one of the most infamous villains in D&D history.
Speaking of villains, we have a porn bot.
Yeah.
Here we go. I'm going to make sure I click on the right one this time.
How did that work? How did they show up this time?
I don't know.
Because they're
was it because I called? Because I called. Was it?
Stop them.
Was it because I called the vampire perv or something? Was that it?
I think
Anyway,
might have someone with villainous intent in chat that summoned them. Isn't that right, Mr. Hyphen?
Oh, hello, minions. I heard there was a chat about villains and was wondering why I wasn't invited.
Well,
oh great! Who summoned the Demi-Lich?
Yeah, you'd overshadow everything.
You know, I could never understand why they called them demi-liches. It seems like they're less powerful than an actual lich. They're only a sort of lich.
Well, it's because they've deteriorated to a point of, senility. Like they've lost part of their mind and went insane.
No. One of the fun. It's not so much a villain, I guess, maybe segueing into our villains always people. One campaign of mine that I ran, unfortunately, it stopped right after we had sort of this big reveal, is that it was a it was a fantasy campaign that took place in the aftermath of the fall of a bigger empire. And so they were trying to reconstruct, and one of the main characters, one of the party characters, not the main characters, but one of the party members was from this set of northern baronies. And as we played out, it turns out that those northern baronies really liked how free they were now that the empire was gone, and had zero interest in trying to restore things because they didn't like that kind of tyranny and having to send resources to the poor folks down south and all of that. And the players suddenly found out that maybe they're the baddies because they're working to try, they're working for the goals of the now reforming. It wasn't the empire reforming, and I use empire symbols. It was like the High King, but they're like, okay, well, now do we help them or? And then the one character was like, well, I could lead the northern baronies to against them. I'm like, okay, you're 4th level, man. But it was fun. I tend to have more moral ambiguity in my games than pure villainy.
So to answer Roland's question here, I would say that the shark is representative of the it's a physical representative of the man versus nature theme, as opposed to being a proper villain, but definitely an antagonist. Yeah.
But I would say
for the purpose of the film, it's the villain. But
the villain's the mayor of the town.
No, what I would say, just the sheer fact of that we tell stories from a human-centric perspective, and the shark is almost actively malicious in attacking humans. It is the villain. It's not a normal shark. This thing is almost demonic in how it behaves. So I would say
the revenge certainly is.
Yeah, but like I think I've only seen the first one, and it's been a while.
To Jamaica, right?
Yeah.
Oh God! Wow, that's
follows them as they travel by air.
By air, yes.
What?
Oh yeah,
How?
Jaws Revenge is incredibly stupid. Watch this movie; it's completely
But nothing is more
nonsensical.
magical than Michael Caine's ability to come out of the water with
The
a
water.
perfectly dry shirt.
Okay. Right. Okay.
Right.
How
let's
did
go
you do
back
that?
into,
It's
let's go
just-
back
just the
into
shi-
villains.
yeah. There you go.
So I think we have touched on the good point. If the players are not willing to buy in, then how can we make them buy in so that the villain can be present? I mean, there are
we
the
can't.
cheap.
Well, they
there's
have
the
their own
cheap way.
goals, right? And I think it's just a matter of sort of intersecting the goals of the players with the goals of whoever is the villain, whether or not they're a villain. Like if you want to create that villain, once the goals intersect, that's it. Otherwise, they're not going to be interested.
And if they really just don't care, if they don't want to get involved, if they don't do any of that, and
that's their business too. Yeah.
If you're running a sandbox game, fine, this goes on over here, and you can't cry about it because you did nothing about with this one, or this went off, or if it then comes to the point of where the players come into possession of items that the villain would want, it's a simple case of, well, first we will attempt bargaining, because unless the villain doesn't believe in that, then they'll try and take by force, and watch as the players will get very, very, very upset at the very notion that someone would dare to take a copper piece out of their purse. Just watch as they will burn down the entire countryside. At least that's my experience. But I've got some rather unique players who will go either all out war crimes, or they will just run and flee.
I'm going to bring, because you mentioned sort of sandboxy ones here, and I'm going to bring up an adventure I still have yet to run. And to be honest, I think Saxon would be better at running it than me, and I'd like to see him run it for his players. And that is the module D3, Vault of the Drow. That is a city containing almost nothing but potential villains. But in order for the party to get on in that city, they're almost certainly going to have to pick one of the 8 or so warring houses to ally with at some point. And all of these drow houses have got their own allies and their own standing within the society, their own relative strength.
Night Below.
And Night Below, yes.
If you want me to
do D4 City of the Drow follow, who did like a homebrew proper follow up to D3.
The reason why I bring up Night Below is because it is exactly as you said. It is rife where the players have to find. It's villains all around, but the players have to find ways to pitch them against one another, and that's where they've got to, make dirty alliances.
In D3 Vault of the Drow, at some point, I would say the party are almost certainly we're going to ally with somebody a group you would consider in a normal D&D game to be villainous. And it's completely up to the players who they work with, who they work against, which bit of infighting they get embroiled in, and it's an adventure that gives the DM a lot of opportunity to portray the villainy.
Absolutely. My second edition group has entered a temporary alliance with a vampiric mistress who is after, who's up for her own goals, but the players' goals of defending their region and the vampiric mistress's goal of attaining certain items are aligning, because they are both looking at the Yuan-Ti being an enemy, and the Drow has recently veered their ugly head, which is, again, the players are very much on high alert because they know that the Drow can strike, but they don't know when they will strike, which is causing a lot of tension in my current campaign.
I mean, say about Night Below. I mean, on Mage's Musings channel at the moment, you're running an evil party through it.
They're an evil party, yeah. So affiliated with an Assassin's Guild.
And one of the interesting aspects of that of that series so far has been just how are the evil party going to deal with the various sources of evil, and when they seem to spend a lot of time bickering amongst themselves as well. and not trusting each
yeah,
other.
I have no idea. We just played on Sunday, the most recent game, and yeah, it's there's some plotting and scheming against one another now, which is going to have some interesting consequences.
That's inevitable when you've got a party of selfish characters, which an evil party will be. Here's a villain I like as well. Yes, I firmly agree here. It's not the greatest of modules. It's a module that is flawed in a lot of ways. But it has got one of D&D's best villains. She's not particularly powerful. She's not, but she's got a lot of humanoids working for her. But she's not particularly powerful. But she is horrible. There is a whole warren of her failed creations living in pain and poverty in a corner of the dungeon. She's really, really sadistic. She's like a Joseph Mengele type character.
Oh God!
Yes. Yeah, she's horrible.
Oh Jesus Christ!
Yeah. And yeah, but I say she's not particularly powerful by herself. Catch her by herself, and she's easy for a party of that level. It's just that she's unlikely to be by herself, and she's got a lookalike as well set up, and all sorts. So she's very clever, very, very clever. I've killed conversation with
Yeah.
That's
it. Stream is done. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah.
It's all right. I'm just trying to think of how to phrase the next point, because we're also on to like, how do you make the villain? Because let's look at the villain and the what it is that we as the DMs want out of a villain, because we want the villain to be there for a purpose, whether it is to drive a story, whether it's to serve the environment that the players are within, or to have some form of impact into the trajectory that the players are heading towards. Ideally they should be colliding, and there should be some form of, not necessarily conflict, but certainly confrontation, where they would measure each other up, or there would be some form of bargaining or evaluation of one another. How will we go about that? Because using at least one of the villains I've had in my campaign, the Yonti, there was no direct confrontation between the Yonti and the players, but the players learned of the Yonti's existence within the region, to which they then did a very long set of investigations to learn, what's the Yonti there for. Do you want me to pause? There we go. Go on. Money.
That'll get you a pint down at the bar.
It certainly will.
Not in the U.S.
Well, yeah, but over here, pints are a $5, man. Yeah, pints are a $5 over here, man. So
I can get a cocktail at my pub for about £4.
Oh, nice.
I'm easy. I don't drink much.
I don't either, man. I just go every 6 months to 2 years and just binge. So
I will buy a six-pack, and most of it will go into my cooking.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Anyway,
villains. Anyway.
Hey, my beef stew is pretty villainous. No.
Does it come alive, and do tentacles come out, and do skeletons jump out of it from all the bones?
Yes.
What?
Absolutely,
okay.
Yes.
How much XP would you get? How much XP would you get? Is it the same as a skeleton mixed with a
half a gazebo,
a black ooze? A black ooze? We
about
just
half
get
a
black
gazebos and 3/4 of an anthill.
Oh God!
Do you want to? Hungar just wants to see the celebration again. That's all it is.
I don't even get the money, but I'll dance to it.
Cheers, Hungar. I just need to explain my behaviour to my missus. Just bear with me.
Keep giving money, Hungar. You might even get him to wear like a pair of kitty ears on his headphone or something like that. I don't know.
Men have done worse for less.
Maybe Hungar is the villain. He's trying to get
It's bribery.
It's just like it is a form of legalized prostitution. That's what it is. She's getting jealous.
My wife was giving me that look as if to say, "I married that."
Saxius is doing a dance. He's the Matrix, boys. It's failing.
Halakar is a good series of questions here.
All right.
Oh, back to topic. Right. Yes. Okay.
So where were we?
Halakar's comment here.
Oh my god.
Okay.
Hey, at least I can say that I'm not the only one who's derailing the convo. At least it's not just me.
I haven't got a set of cat ears, but I can just sort of
Well, you can buy some with that $5 he just sent you. There
You're gonna have to go out and buy some and wear them on the next stream.
Halakar's
Well, they have.
comments were good.
Well, I mean, they have headsets, like gaming headsets with cat ears built into them. So
Yeah.
We're gonna need more than a 5 for that. Anyway, back to topic.
Very true.
Oh god.
Well, yeah, it was funny. I was talking about the evil race, or they became that way. It's so funny the drow as they're presented in the early modules and stuff like that. I was never had this sense that there was like the drow. It was like the drow were a very small group of elves that fell to Lolth, and that was. They weren't supposed to be like this whole race, like, now that everybody's getting all PO'd about them, you gotta have a whole race. I'm like, there were already the minority, little niche group that we're not saying all elves are evil.
They weren't a separate genealogy of elves. They were just regular elves that fell to sin. That's what it was.
Story. It's very built in and baked into the drow. But yeah, they kind of fit into this framework that Halakar is talking about here,
I think the question boils down to what is the world you're playing in. My second edition is very black and white. Good, evil, go at each other, and that's simplified a lot of things. And then we've got a bunch of other things going on. I've got other campaigns where it's very much more like, is it the choice? Were they was this something that happened to them? Are they born into a culture? I mean, my real life group that we just finished Curse of Strahd with, they're going to be taking on the Red Hand of Doom, where I'm going to be presenting, the hobgoblins, and they're going to be presenting the Roman legionnaire mindset towards them, where it's like, we are the superior civilization here. We are here to conquer you because you are savages, and the players are going to be like, wait, hold on. We are the savages here, and they'll have to experience that bit of conflict where it's within the culture. It's not so much the the creature being born that way. It's the atmosphere that you want to go for. Are you looking for hardlined? They were born this way. It is a part of the alignment. If you dare to use alignment in your campaigns,
you feel
so sinister.
In my Renaissance campaign that I was talking about last stream, the whole continent had no humans and no elves or anything on it before the human culture came there, and so most of the humanoids that are there have been formed into loose nations of tribes and clans and stuff like that have been progressively pushed into each other's territory as they pull back from the humans. So to them, the humans are the villains. The humans, of course, think that they're the villains because they're impeding progress, and they keep raiding our villages and stuff and our farmsteads on the frontier, and they're like, well, yeah, because it's their space. You took it. And then there's the orcs that have integrated into the human society who kind of live in this gray area, and to them, the humans are kind of the villains that they have to learn to live with. So, like I said, moral ambiguity is more the villain in my games than anything actually blatant.
Well, that's
Well, I mean,
fun too.
Yeah, which is funny because I like very cookie cutter black and white villain characters, but I don't like villainous situations where it's like out. I mean, I've played a lot of superhero games, so definitely know, I will destroy the world. Why? Because I hate oatmeal cookies. I don't know.
Oatmeal cookies.
Are the raisins in those cookies?
In mine there are.
Then you are evil, my friend.
Ow.
What? Raisins in oatmeal cookies are delicious. What's wrong with you?
Ah, so
can't have an
DK
oatmeal
reveals
cookie.
his true nature too. You too are evil.
Burn the witch.
What is wrong with you people? What is wrong
Everything.
with you?
Just look at me.
Yeah.
I live and breathe Excel sheets. Where do you begin?
Yeah, you're a Slaneshi cultist who loves spreadsheets. There is many a thing wrong with you.
But I embrace it.
But I will say I prefer stories where there is objective good and objective evil. And it's like, it goes back to like the Vlad Tepes example I said earlier. And it's primarily because in stories like where there are no good guys and there are no bad guys. Well, like if you look at stories, they are a thought experiment for a philosophy. And morality to humans is normative. Like virtue is founded on good habits and vice is founded on bad habits. So we want to instill in people good habits that are good for them and everyone around them. So that's why the heroes are virtuous. That's why we want heroes to be heroic and virtuous. That's why we have this dichotomy of good and evil. So when you have someone like Vlad who goes so far to not just become a villain but become a monster, that is infinitely tragic, because it could have been prevented had he been let go of his hatred, had he been humble. It's just sad. But if you see stories like, let's say, Call of Cthulhu, where it's almost a sucker's bet, like it only suckers bet on good, because inevitably the gods are going to win. Like, I don't like this nihilistic storytelling where just chaos is inevitable and entropy is inevitable. That's such a defeatist attitude. Stories, I feel, should be there to lionize the better, the better demons of the better angels of our nature.
That's 100% valid perspective, but it all still boils down to preference. Like, we're all going to play our games in.
Oh yeah, obviously, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. This is just
love
how
stories. So the Call of Cthulhu nihilism is right up my alley.
Well, see, no, it's not even an underdog story. No, an underdog story implies that the underdog has a chance. You have no chance in Call of Cthulhu. Yeah, but even in the war, like in 40K, the implicit conceit when they first wrote that is that chaos is inevitable. It's going to win. The only reason that it doesn't is because, like, if they did that, the story would end and they'd have no way to sell their figurines. That is literally, if they actually followed through on their logical conclusion of their position, chaos would win. Horus would have beaten the Emperor.
But chaos winning would also then be the end of chaos, because there's nothing for them to feed on. They need humanity for them to exist.
Well, I mean, like, even by their very nature, they just consume it anyway, even if they don't want to.
No, like, the warp is a direct mirror of the world and the dark thoughts of the people. If the people are not there, there is nothing to feed the dark thoughts.
Yep.
If the dark thoughts are billowing enough that people just get sick of living, then the dark thoughts will fuel chaos to destruction. It's inevitable. That's what it does.
We can discuss Warhammer 40K on a different time.
I only brought it up anecdotally.
Yeah.
So, no, I mean, I actually like settings where you have that fight the good fight against insurmountable odds. So I don't think that you necessarily have to have villainy there to make the hero shine, because I also love, like, Dirty Dozen kind of games where, Suicide Squad kind of things where everybody's a bad guy but you're playing good guys.
Have any of you read Ricardo has mentioned the Elric novels. Now, I haven't read any of them. I will admit.
Familiar with the characters, but
I'm familiar with the character and of course the Stormbringer.
I've got the cheap knockoff version.
I mean, Black Razor.
Black Razor,
Mellow Star Blade. Yeah.
And it's something that I've got a lot of classic fantasy stuff I want to listen to on audiobook. So it's one of the ones I will come to at some point. But it almost goes the idea of saying different degrees of evil, in a sense, because you were saying there that, like the Dirty Dozen, they're not good guys, but they're not all as bad as each other.
They're definitely better than Nazis.
Yeah, and
Well,
but that's not a high bar to clear, dude. That is very much not a high bar to clear.
even among the Dirty Dozen, there's a moral spectrum. Some of them are criminals, but they're not bad, and then some of them are like the character Maggot, Telly Savalas' character, was pure evil, right?
Yeah, and we all know that criminal doesn't necessarily mean bad. Criminal just means in opposition of the law. So
I've never run an evil campaign, and I would actually like to see how it would play out and explore the degrees of evil thing, but it would probably descend into chaos. No, my player.
You have to have the right players, because most players just want to play evil as an excuse to do all the shitty stuff that they want to do and not actually play evil.
Why do you think people say I'm not evil? I'm chaotic neutral. No, you're evil. You're evil.
I've seen groups and friendship burnt to the ground because of evil campaigns. But that's again. I have a wonderful selection of players where they will do evil things as good characters for the sake of achieving good objectives, especially if you sit down and actually look at what they do. But when they're given the rope of, here, you can now play evil, many of them look at it and go, I will go very far with that, and it's often where I have to take places and go, no, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. We're now having a gentleman's agreement, and I've just come to the simple conclusion that my current player base they can't handle it.
I mean, I've played an evil character in a mixed alignment party, and the players are all like, why are you doing good things? You're evil. I'm like, because evil isn't dumb. I mean, I'm in this town, I'm giving you charity and everything. So next time we go to that town, who do they like? The evil guy.
Exactly.
A chaotic evil character can be that dumb or that impulsive, but not like a neutral or lawful evil one.
Chaotic evil character. That was what I was playing. I was playing chaotic evil character. He's like,
I'm saying can be. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying always, but usually, if you're going to pick an evil that is that stupid, it's usually chaotic evil rather than like lawful evil. Yeah. So it's almost always, but you can be smart as chaotic evil. I'm not saying it's like a universal.
I think you got to separate the moral and the ethics from the intelligence, because that's just what your view is completely different than your actual mental acuity.
That's why I
he's going to go and brutalize people to his evil ends, because that's all he can really figure out. The intelligent chaotic evil guy is going to be like my character is like, I'm gonna endear myself to this town.
Yeah.
So
he's not gonna like a dumbass will just walk into town and just start.
But he gives so much money to the town.
He killed the orcs and he donates to the church. So it's whatever. It's fine.
Let's also bring out, at least from my point of view, if you are having a mixed alignment group, if someone's playing evil, they have to understand that if there is, at least this is my rule, is that if there's going to be conflict, within the party, that player has to understand that they can be ditched, and it's perfectly valid for the other players to turn around and say, we're not having you here anymore, and then you as a player have to be grown up to understand and accept the fact that that's the end of your character's story. Now, but we're not here to talk necessarily specifically about the villainous characters that players can be, because they can go very far. That's not the point. But villains.
I will say now that I've gone further as DM.
How far are we talking here, man?
As a DM, you can go certain lengths, absolutely. But as a player within a party, at least with me as your DM, I will be cracking down hard and say, listen, I'm here for the team to have fun. We have the players to have fun, and if you start impeding on that, that's a personal affront to me.
When I was playing Fenalik in the Horror on the Orient Express, I went beyond what a lot of groups would consider to be acceptable with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted him to disgust the to be honest, it showed what a group of reprobates I was running the game for, because they just loved it.
It's a different story when you're the DM. Like the players expect the DM to play the villains and not. Yeah. Whereas if another player is suddenly doing it, then depending on
I'm with you, because that's not the expectation. I mean, the first session for my 5th edition Curse of Strahd, the players was presented with the moral choice of, you have the father, he has a son who has now become a vampire. The son is, begging for help because he's starving for blood. It's a horrible moral dilemma, and I presented this to the players. The players were discussing what to do, and because the father was there, I stood up and I walked right over next to the player who was trying to argue against his son living, got down on my knees and began begging that character, that player. I got on my knees and began, basically moved to basically take her hand, which she permitted, and basically began begging her to do that. She was almost in tears. She was almost crying because she felt an emotional build-up over the immersion that she was actually having someone's son's life in her hands now, and it was something that many of the other players shifted around, because this wasn't the villain of the father. It wasn't even the villain of Strahd. It was the villainy of Barovia showing his ugly head here. This is the dark morality that they will pit you against, and that you as players then have to stand up against. Yeah. But that was the introduction of this is Ravenloft. This is the sort of darkness you're going to be dealing with.
I know kind of non-apparent villains are one of my favorite things. Like one of the campaigns I was running, the players returned this page to this he's not a noble, he's more of like a tax man kind of a thing for the kingdom, and they thought they were doing a good job. He sent them after him to get him, and then he closed the door, and then they heard some noises, and they're like, did we just get the kid killed? Because what they didn't realize is that this guy was a cutthroat. He had a nice smiley face, and he was trying to do good for the kingdom, but that was at any cause, or by any means. It's like, I'm going to restore the balance here, and next thing you know, the players are like, we're working for the bad guys.
Yeah, I've had to. I mean, I had some other players where they were given a task by an old woman who lived outside of the town, and she told them that, I'm an old woman, I don't have any kids of my own, I run a form of orphanage, some of the kids have gone missing, can you go out and find them? Players go out, they find that they've been kidnapped by some ogres. They fight the ogres, they bring them back, it's all happy dandy. The old grandmother says, come back tomorrow, I will fetch you the gold that I've promised, and some of the magical potions that I've got hidden away. Please go away. They come back the next morning, the hut is gone. There are chicken legs having been signs of having jumped around, very, very large T-Rex sized chicken legs, and the bag of gold was there, as well as the potions. And
it was Baba Yaga.
Yeah, it was Baba Yaga. Players didn't actually know about that lore, but that was a little fun thing that I did to the players. That was an evil thing that I did, and I did get a message from some of the players some months after that. They went, "Did you actually make us sacrifice kids to Baba Yaga?" And I responded back with, "Yes, I did."
But I'm just saying, if people understood myth, if they read it, they would know this.
Well, speaking of evil, we have just been joined by Omanal.
Yes, hello, but I want to mention this to Saxius. If they were good kids, she would not have eaten them.
That's not really for the players to know.
I mean, yes. That's very rare, and it happens occasionally, unless they're extremely virtuous and they trick her. She will still try to eat.
Well,
I've heard
you
it.
can't eat them. I know I've read a few things, but that's why they always threaten the kids. And
Yeah.
obviously they were bad
You
kids,
don't-
like Krampus. You bring
And
Krampus in and he steals kids away.
That's mythological Baba Yaga, not the Baba Yaga in Saxus's game.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Baba
I
Yaga
mean,
is there. She's
Strahd
practically a
should be
demigod.
really damn easy to beat if he's a traditional by the book vampire. It's
Okay.
like, all right.
I mean, he's
I'm
easy to
standing
beat
on
in the
other side
5th
of the
edition
river.
version.
Come get me. Come get me.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw
yeah, but then
silver peas
but-
on your chest. Ha! I've beaten you.
Yeah. And then Strahd just goes, I am the ancient, I am the land.
Yeah, but that's again,
No.
it's not.
But by folklore and
Double
actual
energy
mythology,
drain minions.
he should be
I-
pinned to the ground by a single silver coin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, we're
thought
not
those
doing
were-
folklore.
I
Go
know.
on.
That's
Yeah,
why your Baba Yaga is perfectly valid.
Thank you.
I was just saying that his kids were bad, and it's not their fault that they got eaten for them being bad kids. That's what I'm saying for the players.
Well, of course, they should have run faster.
They
I like
shouldn't
that.
have said no to their parents. I mean, come on. No, actually, as everyone's talking about this whole thing, whatever just happened to having fun being the completely evil villain? I know that Geek has talked about this, but lean into it. Enjoy it all. That's my view on this, is you can go through and just ham it up. Just make it ridiculous.
That's why I liked my Eye of the Deep pirate captain in my nautical campaign.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't disagree, Omanel. I don't, but I like once in a while to make a flawed, fallen, like a hero who has fallen, and to do
Once
that
in
you
a
have to
while,
make
though.
them sympathetic. Yeah. That's
Once
what I mean.
in a
Just
while.
one,
Do it all
like
the
one
time, it
or
becomes
two, like
dull.
like a Death Knight. At Death Knight, you need to emphasize like his fall from heaven. Like you have to, because that's rife. Because he's the fallen knight.
Sure. I mean, it depends on the campaign.
Oh,
I
yeah.
like it when, in my typical campaigns, I like to use the villains as like, this is a goal, because I look at campaigns as there's going to be a start, there's a middle, there's an end, and I continue that throughout the levels. And then that way there are objectives. There's a clear objective. This is where you are going to be going towards, ideally. Now, that can be anywhere from an individual to a larger thing like Red Hand of Doom. You're actually having to fight an army. An actual army is coming after you, and you have to oppose that. And that's not something that you can do, single-handedly. So you have to be clever about that. And
I think my main thing for a villain is that they have to be eminently capable and smart.
Yeah.
The one thing I hate about it is when you have the, what I want to call it, the idiotic villain, because then why are you even the foil to the party? I much prefer having the one, like I said, you can lean into it. If we're going to talk about characters, go look at Xanatos for Gargoyles, for anyone that's watched that cartoon. That is, he's great for it. He's like, well, even if I lose, I still do something where I get ahead. And
Well,
then
I
the
also
other-
like the fact that even though he could destroy the gargoyles at any time, he doesn't. Like, he's like, all I have to do is wait till daylight, and I could just go smash you with a jackhammer.
well, and he's always trying to, but he always takes like 3 different angles.
Oh yeah, he's always
I'm
got
just-
he's got contingencies for his contingencies.
And that to me is what makes them so much fun.
The only
and I'm
time
not
you can ever get away with the idiotic villains is if you have some overwhelming power structure like the Empire in Star Wars, where the officers are all inept, but they've got such a huge grip on the universe that they can afford to be.
I think that's part of it. And I'm not saying that you don't get the other fallen villains, but honestly, it gets pretty tiring a lot of times. And it's not that I don't mind the Faustian bargains or the the Dark Knights or stuff, but I much prefer, as much as I love a Lando Malari character, I still just love the, if I'm going to play the game, I want to just go ham-fisted on it. You did this, and then, be the dragon, embrace evil. And I'm not saying you have to embrace the heart, how do I want to say, the most depraved aspects of it. But
like camp, so, the campy villain, basically.
well, I'm not even saying it necessarily has to be campy, but you can see some of them where they just enjoy whatever they're doing. The one of my favorite villains, if you were going to talk about one, is the Kurgan from Highlander.
Yeah.
You know, he knows he's villainous. He embraces it. He goes through it the whole way, and it's, you know, that's kind of what I like. And it's not that he has to be stupid or anything, but I have to have fun as a DM too. I think that's what, and like Saxia says, is when you're going to do Strahd. Yeah, Strahd is great for that, but you don't have to make him all these things. You know, the other part is Mr. Freeze. Okay, we can all sympathize with him, but you all know you have to stop him. Just because you're sympathetic does not mean that you have to. The players don't have to feel really that sorry for him.
But that's the point of giving them the sympathetic background, is to make the players at least stop and think for a moment, even though if they ultimately choose, no, we got to stop this guy. It gives them that moral dilemma for a moment. That's fun to watch. It's fun to watch.
As a DM, it's always fun to watch that one player who decides, nah, I'm with the villain on this one.
I'm with the villain. I had that in a game many years ago where I was running the group through Temple of Elemental Evil. This is when I was running Second Ed, and Loreth the Beautiful, I had made a noble, a bastard noble from a nearby town, not from Hamlet. I set it within proximity of Saltmarsh because I was rolling them all together. And one of the characters was also of noble blood. And so he was like, no, he has rights as a noble. We can't just execute him. And half the group who are lawful were like, he's right. He has his lawful rights. And the chaotics were like, no, we got to kill him. He's dangerous.
Classic Lex Luthor villain. You know, it's like,
yes,
I've been caught doing something, but I have the lawyers and I have the money, or I've actually looked into the laws of this, and I know I'm completely within my rights and the law, despite, you know, I'm committing villainy, but I have permits.
Well, let's bring the part that Elf Fate's mentioning here. Anyone that watched the cartoon, it was, this is my city. I am the one in charge, and he would help out the Superman or whoever.
Oh, that would always make him totally pissed off too. It's like,
well, it would, but for him it was, I'll deal with you after we've saved the city, and that's what But that makes sense. I like those. That's why it says I like them supremely competent. It's not that they're idiotic. It's not that they're necessarily go hand to hand. It's you don't have to have. If you really want to look at it, we can all have Joffrey from
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Please no more Joffreys.
well, exactly. He's not a fun character. You
just want him to die.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas, and you do want that, but look at his, I
do feel like Lex Luthor had a certain bit angle going on, like I was talking about with my chaotic evil character earlier. Like, if he's the beloved benefactor of the city, they're going to let him get away with anything.
I don't consider that chaotic evil. To me, I like the lawful.
Well, no, I'm saying more so. Just I was referencing my evil character from before that I was talking about. But the evil villain who does the good things to get in good standing, so he can get away with more evil.
I also like the other part that I think is, if we're going to do these tragic characters, it's not that they necessarily have to be sympathetic per se. What they really need to do is they need to show the players what can happen if they go too far. They're really a warning message to the player. This is what can happen to you.
Professor X Magneto dichotomy.
Well, exactly. Well, I was thinking the Faustian bargains. These are all things that you can go in and you go, oh, okay.
Hey, let's all think about it. Doctor Doom is just trying to do what's right for Latveria, right?
But I like Doctor Doom as a character. He's a great character for that. Well, I saw him in Doom 299, to be fair, but they have a vision, and that's the other part. Is I think the villains also need a vision for what they want, and the players are annoying little gnats that get in their way. So,
Cabo brings up a good villain there. Ramsay Bolton.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I was thinking of Ramsay. He unlike, at least in the TV show, because in the.
Sorry, it was a K5K that said Ramsay, but I like Ramsay was definitely a favorite of mine.
Now, which one was he the father or the son?
The bastard
he was the son.
No,
Yeah, the son.
I like the father a lot better.
Roose
Yeah, the
is
father.
Yes.
Roose
Yeah, the
Bolton was
father was far more
calculating.
intelligent. Yeah, the father was far more intelligent. That's kind of the thing where with a villain, like that's why Joffrey was so despised. It's not just that he was evil, but he was just a massive moron.
He was the worst aspect of humanity. Like he represented the worst aspect of all that that you could be. Like, and it was frustrating because he had power, which made him untouchable in a lot of regards. So that's what made him such a great character.
We can forgive a lovable idiot, someone who has good intention but just messes up. But
a malicious idiot.
But a malicious, not even like he's not. It's not even that he's an idiot person. That wasn't the real problem. It's just he was impulsive. That's why he made bad decisions. It wasn't that he was stupid. There was a logic behind
because he never understood half the stuff that was going on around him.
Well, it was
it's not. No, it's not that he was stupid. Here's the thing: it's just because he was a kid, he didn't understand. That was his problem. He had a glimmer of intelligence to him. It's just he was way too impulsive and just would not listen to reason. He was not wise. It's like what Tywin was teaching to Tommen. Like, what does a king who starves himself to death, a king who lets himself be murdered, and a king who thinks that winning and leadership are the same thing? What do all three of them lack? Wisdom. Wisdom is what makes a good king. Your brother was not a wise king. Your brother was not a good king. If he had been, he might still be alive.
Here's
Joffrey was not wise.
Well, Joffrey also was a coward. He was full of hubris. I mean, to hit, and I don't want to say this so much as a villain for the players. That's the worst thing that you have is if you're serving the king and you realize he's an idiot and he's going to bring everything down, and you're good players and you want to keep the realm alive, and you're going, oh my God, we have to get rid of this king, else he's going to destroy everything. But I mean, that doesn't make him a good villain.
I'm pretty sure Joffrey would have been dead if his parents weren't still alive.
Yep. Tywin was looking at him after he disobeyed him like, I have got to get rid of this kid. I have to find some way to get rid of him.
Well, Tywin knew what Joffrey was, and that's why he was telling him, and that's why Joffrey would do whatever Tywin told him. To be fair, everyone did. And see, Tywin is a better villain, is a much better villain because he has all the characteristics that we would consider virtuous, with cold-blooded ruthlessness.
One question: how come they haven't tagged the actor who plays Tywin to play an Imperial officer yet? Come on.
Oh, come on, man. Yeah,
he may have turned them down. He may have been offered and turned them down. Who knows?
It's like, I'm tired of you guys making us Brits all villains.
But
Alien 3.
He was also in the Crown, I think.
I don't know. I'm just saying he very much has that profile of an Imperial officer in his delivery, and I mean, if they can do if they ever need a competent Imperial officer, kind of like the ones that they had in Andor, where the Empire actually looks scary, then maybe they'll pull him out.
What summarizes Tywin's, because it's in the books. I was told this. What was in the books, what I like about it is when he started going bald, right? He actually went up to his barber and just told him to go to shave all his head off because his mantra was no half measures. And that summarizes him in a nutshell. Like it doesn't matter. I will do what is the best for the realm because what's best for the realm is what's best for my family. And if I will lie, cheat, and steal, I will betray, mutilate, and murder anyone in my path. Because, tell me how is it more honorable to kill 10,000 men in the battlefield than one family at dinner?
Well, and Tywin also had no problems using the mountain. It didn't care what he did.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
the mountain that walks, the mountain that rides.
I don't know if we're anywhere near topic anymore, but
we're talking villains, so
we're still discussing villains, the aspects of them, the qualities.
Henchmen. There we go. Villains and their henchmen.
An interesting thing about Tywin is, like if you've read the expanded materials, is that he was a good leader. He was a good ruler of his land. Like he was, he was arguably lawful evil, but he understood that if the small folk thrived, so did the kingdom. So he actually listened to the concerns of the farmers and the peasants, and would go against other nobles nobles in the peasants' favor, especially if it was rational.
Yeah,
So
he
it's-
also understood that if the peasants were all out of hand and all unhappy, then the monarchy's not going to last long.
Exactly. Yeah, so
He was very smart.
wise. Yeah, he was very
I mean,
canny.
we did touch on the historical influences earlier, and to his people, he probably wasn't a villain. I mean, look at some of the medieval kings. King Edward I, perfect example. To the Englishman, he was a great hero. To the Scots, to the Welsh, to the French,
I'm related to
to
that guy.
yeah, to the French.
Edward, I would say even Edward
To the
the
Jewish,
Third. Yeah, Edward III, more than any other monarch, was the reason why a lot of Irish people suffered because of England. Because he cemented the laws that separated the English aristocracy from marrying with the Irish aristocracy.
But he was also one of the most effective English kings in history.
Yeah.
And his people loved him. It's just that
He was-
everybody else who he came up against didn't, because he was
the Tywin of real. He was Tywin in real life.
He wasn't the king of
rumored-
everybody else. He was the king of England.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, he was so terrifying. It is rumored that he caused a man to die of a heart attack just by looking at him. Like that is the no, I'm serious though. He was so intimidating. A dude literally got a heart attack. Like he just stared at him. And the dude just freaked out and died. Like,
To be
even
fair,
if it's not
a lot of
true-
stuff gets written about in ancient manuscripts.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying it's definitively true, but just if that's the case, like it just speaks to the mythology surrounding how utterly terrifying this guy was. You know, if the rumors that spread about you, even the rumors have a nugget of truth to what they say about you. You know, and if the stories are saying that he's terrifying enough that people will die just from looking at him, then there's got to be some truth to his intimidation factor. So
Sorry. I mean, we're all of ththese great. You know, Genghis Khan, the I can't remember which.
Vlad Tepes.
Well, Vlad Tepes was a small, minor king when you look at him. I'm talking about look who took over the
Julius Caesar. You
Yeah.
look at,
Julius Caesar. Yeah, I came,
you've-
I saw, I conquered.
And I made salad.
You've got, well, at least in the Danish histories, you've got Valdemar the First and Valdemar the Second, who did major expansions within Denmark, bringing it to one of its centers, or King Christian the Fourth of Denmark, who brought out a economical renaissance and loads of wars with Sweden. Loads of historical inspirations that you can take for events, and also characteristics that you can bring up.
Alexander the Great. Alexander the
definitely
Great.
was.
you could use all of these as villains in a campaign or heroes.
Easily.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, hell, I'd be happy to use Rasputin from Russia as a great example of a very charisma-driven cleric or priest. You know, where they are just very charismatic. They have a way of just getting people to like them.
I think the other thing when we're looking at this, especially when it comes to D&D, is we have to remember when you have alignments, they know that they're evil, which is the whole point of when you have the draft. Why are you trying to hold this back? I mean, other games do this better, but with D&D, you have that true alignment balance up to the point that you even have languages so you know where you fit in the realm. So go all in there. So that's the way that I look at it. The problem that I have all too often is, and I know that the K5K is talking about this, but if you kill off all of your henchmen, no one's loyal to you. You have no one there. It makes it awfully hard to hold someone because you rely on other people to actually keep you in power. Unless you talk about D&D like you're a dragon, where no one can really touch you. Those are the kinds of things that especially with rulers, they need to have that aspect. Now you can have the crazy person going off somewhere else, but you still have to have the respect. But now, if anyone really wants to talk about talk about completely brutal, and I don't know where this would fit in, even though she's a saint, is Olga of Kiev, and look what she did.
Who? Olga.
Olga.
Olga. Yeah.
Oh,
Or
yeah.
Saint
look at
Olga.
Elizabeth. Look at Elizabeth Bathory. If you want another example of just utter depraved psychopathy.
Bathed in the virgin blood.
Yes. But
That one is debatable, but I mean, the
It's-
murdering
whether or
of the
not
young
true is
maiden.
tied in with the legend and myth. So
yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, she
Well-
did kill a lot of innocent people, though. That is not disputed. That has been proven.
Somebody's
and
got an
Russia-
evil dog at the moment as well.
I'm sorry, that is my dog, and he's upstairs, and he's that loud. Imagine being in the living room with him.
Oh, jeez.
He is a
I know what it's like.
Pomeranian Chihuahua Jack Russell cross.
Right.
You should hear
Right.
whenever my dog sees us returning home, she's like screeching her head off, and it's like.
I guess the question is, do people mistreat your dogs? Because if not, you're not villains, and let's get on topic.
Well, the other part is, and I need to start going in this, but as much as people talk about the conquistadors when they met the Aztecs, neither were good people when you look at them, and yet the conquistadors were greeted with young children whose blood was going to be poured over the food, so they could because they were representatives of the gods. Now, I don't care if you're coming from Europe. That's like you're just the most horrified person ever.
The efficacy of those claims is not is heavily up for debate because a lot of that is written down by the Spanish.
But you also have to remember. You also have to remember that it was the other tribes that the Aztecs were oppressing that convinced everyone else to side with the conquistadors. That is how bad the Aztecs were. They hated everyone. Everyone hated them.
Well,
everyone.
And Elfbait, it's not just that. They have archaeological evidence that they did
they buried children underneath buildings. It's fucking awful.
Oh, it's cannibalism. I mean, they have plenty of the books.
Yeah, because those Spanish were totally innocent.
I never said that. No. I did not say
give me that when I said you had two bad people meet. I said that the very before
it was lawful evil versus lawful evil. That was what it was.
No. It's lawful evil versus chaotic evil. Let's call it what it is. Like the way that the Aztecs were behaving.
There's plenty of law there.
There's still structures.
That was all based on calendars and priests and organizations.
You still had a civilization, a hierarchy within.
I don't. Chaos.
You're just putting your own personal moral spin on it there.
Yeah. See, this was the pun that I had with Drow. It's chaotic evil, and then they would talk about the streets were completely clean. I said, no, chaos generally is not that orderly. You have to have order to do that. And those are the things I got mad about for some of that.
I think the reason that they got away with it with the Drow is because the Drow were chaotic with a veneer of law. They weren't. They bullied people into behaving. Yeah.
I read a passage about one of fantasy, but the inspiration for the Drow society really stuck with me, in the sense that it took a Drow lord 15 minutes to cross over 15 feet, because he at every step crossing this bridge between his side of the castle and his sister's side of the castle, they were expecting traps, ambushes, assassination, bombs, everything to just go off, just to sort of establish just how they were chaotic evil. But it was such a the society was still being very much oppressed up and down for the sake of having the order, but it was a cloak and dagger. Go on.
I just want to say to Jemming the Lemming, possibly great idea of grey heroes might be a topic for a future stream.
I'm kind of tired of those, to be honest. I mean, I hate.
Yeah, we need. Yeah, just heroic heroes, please.
Well, I mean, all the anti-heroes and everything else that comes into it, and most players actually, if you look at it, do play kind of either good characters or gray, ambiguous characters. Just like you were talking about that monster manual in your picture, we don't know what they were doing. So I'm okay with that. But yeah, chaotic versus lawful societies. But that's where you usually get ogres and stuff they're supposed to have bones strewn around, and it's chaos is supposed to represent chaos, and lawful is supposed to represent order. And in D&D, that's what's supposed to go.
I don't think
through
lawful
something.
necessarily means you're a neat freak.
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily.
I mean,
It
bones
can
all
be.
over could be your aesthetic.
Yeah,
It can be.
it's a slob, a lawful slob versus a chaotic neat freak.
I mean, I personally think the traditional lawful evil villain is almost the perfect villain. It's the organized, the meticulous villain, the villain who covers their tracks, the villain who plans misdeeds over a long period of time.
You can still be lawful evil, but maybe not necessarily be that orderly, because you can still have a low intelligence. But as lawful evil, you would at very least recognize that you've got a superior, and then you would be deferring over to that, which was one of the things I read when I read Knights of things like Black Rose. Soph encounters a dwarf were-badger, and the dwarf immediately goes like, "You are a much bigger villain than me, and I swear allegiance to you because I know my place in this pecking order."
I think the other thing that makes lawful evil kind of fun is that they do have rules they follow, and rules that they tend not to break, even for themselves. Yeah. So they have a code of honor in that.
So it's more that they respect the concept.
Yes.
Yeah, like the lawful evil characters, there is going to be some form, not necessarily structure, but there are rules that are applied, and it can be a code that they've made up for themselves. It could be things like the samurai Bushido code. It could be the chivalrous code of the knights. It can be the Roman commandments, or whatever you want to make of them. But there is something that they use to sort of like put out of their own framework. They're not chaotic. Would be more of the sense of like, there are no rules of engagement. That doesn't mean that they have to be stupid in their engagements, but there's nothing that really that holds them back. They won't adhere to the structures and rigids of others, but they will definitely go out of their way to bring out some form of initiative of their own.
See, in chat discussing the history of the Aztecs.
Well,
as has been said, the history is written by the victors. I don't think we'll ever get a true record of exactly what happened, and we will never know. A lot of bad stuff went down, I think, from both sides. In that,
well, of course, yeah.
That's the whole point. Is that they play this one is good versus evil, and a lot of times what you do is you find out it's two avarice societies clashing at each other, whereas in the civilized area people can be normal. There's a quote about how far is chaos, like 9 meals away or so from people. There's between people something good and bad, but there are always weird things in there. But I mean, go look at even when things are internal. But none of the conquistadors will people say, "Oh yeah, the conquistadors were these great people." I read the book about Francisco de Orellana. Yeah. Anyway, they literally write in there that they were throwing the natives to the dogs because they would not give up the location of the city of gold. And people forget, we're talking about dogs tearing human beings apart. This is not, it was just like, let's flip the people forget.
You also
just
have
how
to consider
brutal
who would often go on those ventures too. I mean, you're not talking about
the worst
society. It's like,
these are people with no prospects,
no future, no prospects. Come along to America.
Yeah, and they're also under orders from people like the kings who are financing these things to come back with wealth. So like if they came back empty-handed, like it would mean like their families would be shamed, they'd lose everything, they could even face death.
Well, yeah, this is like why ancient tax collection is always painted in such a bad picture, because the way it was made, the institution was flawed. It's like, I tell you I can collect 5,000 pieces of gold, whatever I collect over that I get to keep. So of course I'm going to squeeze the populace.
But Elf, you could have just stopped there by saying that's why taxes are evil.
No, they're not. Do you like
Yeah, they are.
roads? Do you like schools?
No, I hate
People can build them themselves.
But they don't.
Yeah, well,
Well,
Yeah,
And they
well,
don't
that's-
manage them well. It's all well and good to say, I want self-determination, but wait until the road that connects you to the next town breaks down. Then you get into a huge fight over who gets to fix it.
I could get into this debate, but it is far outside the purview of this
Okay.
discussion, and
I
I'd
am
be here for about
stepping in.
3 hours.
Stop.
No politics. No politics on this
No,
stream. Thank you
that's
very
true.
much.
This isn't
all of
politics.
it-
This is
Yeah,
all
it-
economics.
it-
Totally different.
He's right.
He is
My
right.
bad. My bad. I took the bait.
Well, and I have to laugh because some of these things just don't apply for where I live. Anyway,
I was talking about medieval tax collection. That's I wasn't talking about politics. I was
Well,
talking
and see,
about
the
the policies
problem-
that set up for villainy.
Listen, you want to talk real villainy? Have the taxman be the enemy.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny.
Base.
The villain I was talking about earlier effectively was a tax man. He was the excise man for the kingdom.
Sheriff of Nottingham.
He was
I've-
census
greatest
taker
film villains
and
ever.
tax collector.
I mean, he
One
was
of the
tied to
greatest
the
film
worst
villains.
English king that ever lived, John. Like, God, a king so
I-
bad you still haven't named another King John since.
One of the most inspirational villainous performances ever. Alan Rickman as the Sheriff of Nottingham.
I
don't think
will
I've seen
carve
that.
out your heart with a spoon. Why a spoon, brother?
Oh,
Because
I
it's
have
dull.
seen that.
It'll hurt more, you twit.
Alan Rickman in anything. Come on.
Oh God.
yes,
Oh,
and he
God,
played
I
the
have-
villain so well. And just Die Hard or anything. He was such a great, and that's why I said those are the kinds of characters you want to play up. I want to play those characters, not
Of course.
That's why I was saying is I want them to be, especially for Die Hard, you're intelligent, you've thought through stuff, you have good henchmen. You don't even have to be the most powerful fighter in the entire area. That's what you have henchmen for. You just have to be relatively untouchable until your henchmen are taken apart.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
Look,
speaking of another fun one, anyone that's watched The Professional or Leon and having
Gary Oldman's character.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, Gary Oldman's also one of those guys who just put him in something, please.
Yeah, he's a complete
Yes.
chameleon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Or is-
Gary
Characters
Oldman's great.
in-
Oh, come on. Let's not forget, in the Conan movie, Thulsa Doom, and what a
Yeah.
great, villain he was.
Well,
I mean,
anybody
I only-
who can get a guy who looks like, Bruce Dickinson from Iron Maiden as one of his main villains, it's okay with me.
The greatest,
Like a really
the greatest.
buff
Oh
Bruce
my,
Dickinson.
I can't believe you guys are overlooking one of the greatest villains that ever was, Mark Hamill.
That's the Joker?
Yep.
I thought you were about to say Mark Hamill as Mark Hamill.
Yeah.
I'd say the Joker's kind of overplayed. I mean, his performance of the Joker is probably great.
Yeah.
I mean, not probably. I mean, he's a great performance, but I've never found the Joker overly interesting.
I liked
Well,
what
I
they
mean-
did in The Dark Knight because the
Yes.
Joker, and there wasn't just a madcap villain, he was an actual challenge to the hero's method and morals and,
He's the
and
first
ideology.
Joker I ever felt could actually exist.
Yeah.
And that's
I
why it
mean,
was interesting.
he did see. Whereas the heroes tried to have moral certainty, what the Joker liked to do was put in moral doubt. He
Yeah, exactly. He-
always made people question. He literally got Batman to say, and tonight you're gonna break your one rule. I'm considering it.
And that's why he was compelling, as opposed to like Jack Nicholson's Joker, who was basically a showman, but
Funny.
his character journey went from rational psychopath to becoming the Joker and becoming an irrational psychopath. It's like,
And,
I mean,
the big
Joaquin
villain
Phoenix
in
was
Gotham
also
City
good.
is Batman himself, though. I don't kill people. How do you think happened when that building?
Well, in the
or
original
when you dropped
comics,
that guy off the building?
in the original comics, he did kill people. So
Well, yes, for like
Yeah,
the
and
first
things
3
have
or
changed.
4 issues, he had a pistol on his belt.
and in my
Yeah,
opinion,
like
he should have kept it.
Well, then we're just having the Punisher.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't
Like,
even have
we've
an
got-
origin story when he first started out. Come on.
Mm. Anyway,
Well, we were technically talking villains.
Yeah, well, we're
we're
all
still-
picking villains that we like, or ones that are. Well, and again, is it fun for us to play as a DM? Is it fun for the players to encounter them? Because there's nothing worse than the character, the villain that you like, and the players are just like, him again. Can we do someone else? You know, that's the other part, is you have to make the villain compelling, and that's ideally you want the players to obsess about getting rid of the villain. That's what makes a lot of fun from there as well.
Well, definitely, yes. You want to make the villain that I won't say the centerpiece of every adventure, but you want the villain to be the one who is at the forefront of the players' minds most of the time. You've obviously got to deal with the matter, whatever the matter is at hand, but the ultimate goal has got to be that the villain is compelling enough to be. Well, the villain has to be the ultimate goal, and the villain has to be compelling enough to be that ultimate goal. So,
well, and if it's in the shadow, it doesn't even have to be in the forefront. But you know that shadow still looms over the entire group, and they know that it's going to come at some point. And that's why I said sometimes you can have it where the players, they say, well, we're just going to ignore this villain. Well, the villain after a while will not ignore them if he keeps screwing up their plans. Oh, well, we took out this minor little lord over here, this bugbear, and you go, hey, I was doing that so I could take over this village over here, and they would join my my kingdom to protect them from the goblins that I happen to be paying off. So they would ask for my help. So yeah,
I mean, I'll take you back to what I did with Fenelek in Horror on the Orient Express. Whenever the party felt like they were taking it easy, getting a bit of downtime, there would be a mist creeping under the door. There would be a hand forming on the shoulder of one of the party, and there would be that sickly whispering voice in one of their ears, informing them of what he wanted to do. Not necessarily in terms of the whole plot, but just to that party member sometimes. Just depending on how I wanted him to act in the moment. But he was I wanted them to know that he was always watching them, always aware of what they were doing, and they would not escape from him.
And I think that's part of what makes Ravenloft so different from the other modules that were in that same time era.
Yes,
is whether you saw Strahd or not, he was always looming over the entire module. So that's I think there's that aspect as well.
Well,
I'm gonna tap out, guys.
Games.
All right.
Cheers,
bye, guys.
Okay, bye.
That would be good. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I think that might lead us to something about making a villain compelling, in that Strahd had a very imposing and obvious base of operations. And do you like to give them intricate hideouts? Do you like to give them some sort of the party some lair to eventually hunt the villain down in, or is the villain just ongoing?
So my issue with that, honestly, in running games is whenever I've presented an obvious place, an obvious lair, the party beelines for it. Almost, I mean, not specifically like, not exactly like they go straight for it, and die because they're third level and he's way above them or anything like that. But if it's too obvious, they tend to try to take as direct a route towards the end goal as they can. As opposed to maybe going through all the bells and whistles and loops and everything that makes a good villain fun. You'll read a lot about the mechanics of villainy, having the players run into minions and then henchmen, and then little seeing the villain at work but not hit him directly. Getting players to do that when the end game is too obvious, has always been a problem with me. It's like I end up having to almost derail the players from their chosen path a lot of times, especially in very open settings. Like if you're in a sci-fi setting and they can just go through space to get to the Death Star,
Yeah, I mean, when I ran Village of Homlet for my group, as soon as you're right, as soon as they found out that the moat house existed, off we go. Let's go. Let's go there.
Yeah.
So that I say, let them. They, they'll be repelled. They'll get their asses handed to them. They'll learn a lesson.
True, but it doesn't
That's
make
what
for a
happened.
necessarily very great campaign if that happens, because it's very possible you're also going to wipe the party, and then where you're at. Now, granted, that was their choice, but if you're looking for overall, like, as a DM, I'm going to have fun too, kind of thing.
So we're gonna have to ask Mage's Musings. How many times have your party almost been completely wiped under your Keep the Borderlands?
Quite a few times. Often they get themselves into the trouble. There was that one episode where the wizard charged those goblins, and I found out after the fact that the player was trying to suicide his guy because he was bored of him. He didn't think to ask me if he could swap out his character. And of course, everybody else was trying to save him because we can't let him die. And it's like, okay, well.
Yeah, your campaign probably works pretty well in that fashion because there's sort of a concession, it feels like, at least from as a spectator, that revolving characters is part of that campaign.
I told them at the outset, expect to be hard, expect to be like there's no gimmies. You're dead at zero. I'm not doing any near death rules or death's door rules, and play smart, and don't be afraid to talk to creatures, talk to enemies. Just because they're a goblin doesn't mean they're out to get you, unless of course you're an elf or a dwarf. Right?
In classic D&D, that's exactly the way that he would play. It was a different group almost every night. Or it may be the same.
That's how it was written. I never played it that way.
Well,
No.
But we didn't play that way. But let's be honest. If you have, I'm going to say 50 regulars. Now, not everyone's there every night. It's just like whenever you have. Yeah, exactly. I see your.
Yeah, you're in a club as opposed to it's you and three other friends.
Yeah, that makes a big difference because he was running it every night, and whoever showed up that night got put into the dungeon, and then they were supposed. The expectation was they would go out and come back before the end of the night.
I would hear that, and I'm like, it's really easy to run it every night when that's your job.
Well, exactly, but that's. Yeah, I think that's sometimes where we forget about that, and by doing so, you kind of expect that, and then the character's like, well, and I see this from Sean. You correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like now that you have a character that's third level in your group, I'm sure all of a sudden he becomes really defensive over that one.
I mean, I'm 2 episodes behind, so you don't know some of the fun developments, but he's fighting for his life. But I was about to say, you're talking about Gygax's old way, playing in a massive club where there's a rotation of 50 some odd players. Even bringing back to the topic, that'd be really fun to have an overarching villain over a game like that, where you've got different groups like conspiring. So okay, Geek, you're playing the paladin. Saxius, you're our cleric. I've got my straight up fighter. Let's band together and try to get that guy. Bring down and get the bounty, get the reward.
I'm guessing in that sort of game, the villain might well sort of appear organically, and could eeasily depend on the actions of other players.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, yeah.
That would be a lot of fun.
I mean, that you might create a villain from an otherwise neutral NPC who was never intended to be a villain, but depending on the actions of the party, he could become the villain because of what some other characters may have done to him at some point.
Anyone? I'm going to bring up a role-playing game. Anyone played Shadow over Mordor or Shadow of War?
No.
I have got it lined up as one of the next games I want to play.
So what they do is they have the Nemesis system.
Yeah.
And exactly what you're describing as they begin to kill off, then they start moving, they become more powerful as they start killing off characters. So it may seem like it's nothing, like, oh, well, we're just fighting this. Well, after a while, you start saying, well, oh, okay, I'm going to go up in the next level. And you say, well, you know what? This goblin's now become a chief because he killed off two characters so far. And now the players, as they're starting to go back, start hearing about this great war chief. And that's what I guess that Geek was talking about, having it organically. If you know there's a monster in this dungeon, you know that he's pretty tough, and it starts adding up. And then the players are going, well, he's getting a little bit tougher. We better make sure we get proper levels and better equipped. And, whoever runs out and comes back, he's become tougher. All right, let's get a bigger band together.
Well, I like that system also because I employ that in my typical freeform games where I almost have like factions, much like the chieftains you can see running around doing their own little internal fighting. I do that with the factions to basically represent the world. There are still the movers and shakers who wants to have their own things that they want to carve out from the environment that the players are in. So they do things that impacts the overall world, the stories, the events, and then some of them, like in my second edition game, they then spring out to become prominent villains for the players to combat and take on.
I'm going to say one other thing, though. Is anyone I'm going to bring this up here. For anyone that wants to play villains, it's called the Wicked One, which basically takes the Blades in the Dark system, and you play the monsters building a dungeon, and at some point that adventurers will come down and kill you. But that's the whole point of the game, is it's supposed to run for a certain period of time. But you can play
Dungeon Keeper.
Well, that's basically what it is. It's Dungeon Keeper, and I think it looks. I really enjoyed reading it. I haven't played it, but it sounds great. You can play whatever you want. You can play a beholder, a kobold, a doppelganger, a dragon. There's a few different things. An orc. There's all sorts of things you can play in there, and so I think that's one of the things that while we're talking about villains, that sometimes the players can be the villains, and then you just have to throw. They know they're going to lose at some point, but that's okay.
All villains should lose in the end, really. In the end.
Yes.
Hopefully after a very satisfying adventure. Or
No,
series
I'm
of
sorry,
adventures.
Minion. I have to disagree with that stance.
Well, no, Mr. Hyphen. You have lost in the past. There are stories and legends about you losing.
Oh, I beg to differ. I don't know what newspaper you're reading.
He's reading The Sun. Fake news.
Actually, at this point, you can basically pick up any paper and you can say it's just
Fake news. Yeah.
I think K5K makes a good comment here with villains take, villains destroy, villains corrupt, villains kill. They are a force of entropy. Even if they have plans, their actions cause chaos. Yes, I mean, an individual villain might be lawful, organized, but the net result of their villainy will almost always be something chaotic.
Unless you're Lex Luthor.
Again, like I think I agree with K5K. It's definitely, if you want them to be villains for the players to go up against, there should be something that erodes away the world in which they're in. There should be something that they can see almost tangibly, so that is being affected by them. And I think it's definitely something that's worth it.
But it doesn't have to be their intent.
Exactly, like to me, it's always down to like they will still have a goal. Again, a worthwhile villain wants to achieve something, and rarely are many villains who set out to do something evil. The road to hell is paved with good intents, and that's often how I like my villains to be portrayed. They have ideals of achieving good. However, often, like we see in history, the chase for utopia is just one more, evil deed away, and then we will all be happy.
That's why I like I mentioned him several times, but Lex Luthor is a good one because, like, in his best written stories involving him, the only chaos that ever comes out of his actions is that perpetrated by the bad guys, or by the good guys, I mean. So he comes out looking like the good guy because, well, I didn't ruin this city in a big muscle-bound fight. That was Superman who dropped that building. I just tried to rig the elections and poison this, and spike the city's water supply with mind control drugs. But
I think the other part is for a base. I like having a base. I just like it being far away from the players. So it's an adventure and an effort just to get there, let alone anything else. And really, especially for D&D or something like that, okay, now you have to go across the wasteland. You have to fight off the minions. It's almost, I'm not saying this is great, it's almost like having to go into, Queen of the Demon Web pits. You have to go down several layers. Then you have to get into her mechanical ship. You have to fight everyone. And to be fair, if you actually look at least the second edition, you have to go through Temple of Elemental Evil against the Slavers, and then you have to go against the Giants and that group, and then only then can you go fight the Queen of the Demon Web pits after you've gone through. How many modules is that? What, 16 or something?
You have to go through that many to be high enough level to take on the Queen of the Demon Web pits.
I would argue that the Queen of the Demon Web pits by itself is a villain because it's such a bad module.
Well, that's why there's that D4 that I mentioned earlier. It's evidently supposed to be a better ending.
But that's the whole point. Is that's a whole arc, and that's the thing I think that really needs to be there. Is even if you want to say, okay, we're going to go here. Well, it's very easy if you just cascade and walk in. It's very different when. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I really wonder, speaking of arc, if those modules were originally intended to be an arc, because they're so different in what they present. I can't help but feel like they had ideas for cool adventure, little trios of adventures, and then somebody's like, it'd be really cool if we could sell all 16 of these as some giant.
They was retroactively merged.
Yeah. Because I know a couple of them were tournament modules too.
Yeah. The original series GDQ 1 to 7 were written as a series, but as Mage's Musing just said, it was retroactive that they were put together. I mean, T1 to 4 didn't even follow into A1 to 4 because there were level issues. You'd be typically about 7th or 8th level when you got to the end of T1 to 4, and yet the Slavers series was originally designed for slightly lower levels than that, and they padded it out with nonsense, really.
And the villain here is marketing.
I think we can all agree.
But I mean, if they have to go over through this, and whatever story it is, if you're going to fight the villain, you have to go through the whole arc. You have to. It's not that you can just walk there. You just can't just teleport there. And I think that's it. And to be fair, you don't get teleport till 11th level. If you're working your way through, then that's fine. But it took you so long to get there. That it's a real adventure. It's like, okay, we've been playing for a couple years. Now we're ready to finally take on our villain. But sometimes this is why I don't like the level-based system, is I can make different villains in my in different systems without having to feel that the player's either so completely overpowered or the villain is underpowered when they finally get there.
Well, I think you could do that easily with a level-based system because you just don't have them run into the. You can constantly have them interact with the villain with a degree of separation through his minions. And you can start at the lowest levels by having things that just don't even seem connected to the villain, like that. Using the tax collector as an example, that local tax collector who's really squeezing the villages and stuff just seems like local corruption until the players find out that it's him and the tax collector in the county over, and the tax collector in the county over from there, and all the extra money that they're squeezing is going up a level, and you find out that there's a conspiracy, and then you get to that point, you're like, oh, this conspiracy has to do with something even bigger, and all that money is funding a private army that's in the control of the high cleric of the blah blah blah, because he's going to be. Next thing you know, you've got to the villain, who is your high cleric, who's trying to form a private army so he can overthrow the king. And it all started with local taxes that are a local tax collector that's easy for like levels 1 to 2 to take out.
Elf, my second edition campaign started with the kidnapping of a chicken. It started there, and it led to we found a group of goblins that are all sickly. They're all like malnourished, and they're living out in a hoveled out place that they've ramshackled together. Like, this is not a normal goblin baron, like, or warren. This is very weird. And then it just led on, and before the players knew it, they were discovering that hobgoblins had martialized. They were basically like bringing all the other monster tribes under their banner, either through intimidation, martial invasion, or straight up bribery, because someone had provided them with a minting machine that they were minting money with, and they were excavating out an old silver mine to fund themselves. And the players were like, it all just started with us just needing to find a chicken. We now have a conspiracy of the monsters unionizing and going up against us. Like, where's this?
Yeah,
It's a case of the kidnapped children.
I had some what seemed like petty theft from nobles' houses, and then some grave robbery, leading all towards basically a vampire trying to resurrect her dead daughter. And it was like, it starts out with, hey, these trinkets are being stolen from these nobles' houses. Well, the trinkets were things that had been, had belonged to her and were, when she was a living noble. And then the grave robbery was actually trying to find where they had hidden the body of her daughter when they buried her, because they didn't want her to have the kid because reasons I can't remember. It's been years. That was my very first 5th edition campaign. But no, that was fun. I mean, eventually they're staking out graveyards and trying to figure out which one's going to get hit next.
I mean, we're all focusing generally on our villains being humanoids, but what about our non-human masterminds? Like, and I noticed they did a better job, I think, in 5e than they did in 1st and 2nd edition with the Beholders.
Well, I mentioned earlier that I had an Eye of the Deep pirate captain in my nautical campaign.
Did he have an eye patch?
He had a hat.
That's good enough.
He did have an eye patch too, and it was actually a magic pearl that had like powers.
So a one-eyed creature wearing an eye patch, perfect.
Yes. Did he have a peg eye stalk?
Yeah.
A wooden eye stalk.
His central eye had been replaced by basically a giant black pearl.
Oh, okay.
That's cool.
I
like
one
that.
One of our chat villains has joined us in the form of Al. But I see Sextus has already replied to a question about a villain that hires the party. Now, I've not really done that in D&D, but I've certainly done it in Call of Cthulhu.
That's just called cyberpunk.
Shadowrun, Cyberpunk, any of those. Yeah.
Star Wars, a lot of times, even though the players may want to start out, we're going to play Rebels, the next thing you know, everybody's getting hired by Jabba the whatever. And
well,
I've heard that as well.
I agree with this. Mind Flayers are great villains too. I liked. There are a few of them in Iron Kingdoms. I forgot what they're called. I'll have to pull out the book, but basically
they're so wonderfully alien and irredeemably evil. That's the
Techno-Liches or whatever they are in the.
I like the Yuan-Ti. I've really grown fond of them. The Machiavellian 17 to 18 intelligence, grand scheming snake people.
This was not mine, but we had a DM I knew had a dragon as the villain in his game, and he was basically giving the adventuring party the location of other layers and stuff to get him treasure.
Nice.
He'd basically outsourced his treasure hoarding, and
the main villain in the 5e game I was running was a polymorphed blue dragon, who was making a power grab for that part of the world in order to boost his own horde. Dragons make great villains because of their intelligence and their power level. And certainly, if you introduce a very powerful one early on, way beyond the player's abilities, it forces them to go adventuring to gain power.
I've got a hag up against one of my groups. They don't know it's a hag dealing with them. They think it's some avatar of Titania, but it's really just a hag with a fancy cloak that shimmers her image.
But I mean, those are things that, well, and I always like the devils and the demons. You know, the whole point is, I'll give you this or that, and you know, while they're trying to corrupt everything, of course, the players are trying to stop it, but you know, they may not even know what they're up against. I think that's the other part that comes into it is they know that there's some force behind it, they just don't know who or what.
I know. I like faceless villains where it's not so much a set individuals, like in that same nautical campaign with the Eye of the Deep pirate captain. There is a analog to the East India Company in there, and I play them kind of like you would play Imperials in Star Wars, where they're out there interdicting and just being iron-fisted bastards over all commerce in this area of the sea. And so they're a constant foil and a pain in the ass for the players and the NPCs, because anytime they pull something off, the sea is full of ships that are going to come after them, or privateers hired by them. And they're really nothing that the players can beat on their own because they're just so powerful and ever present. But there's no one person they can really go after, because even if they were to go to the very top and kill the head guy, well, there's just another functionary under him. It's an organization, you know.
And that's, I think, having those shadow organizations where it's not necessarily even, well, what are you going to do against the Assassin's Guild when you don't know who it exists or who's part of it?
Yeah, well, this one's not even a shadow organization. They're right out there in the open with uniforms and flags and and an office that you could walk right up to if you get past the guards. But if you kill the Lord Admiral, there's just a guy waiting to promote into his place.
In fact, he probably wants the Lord Admiral to be killed so he can take his place.
Oh yeah, that was the fun thing. Is like, you know, all right, so you'll pay this guy off. You'll pay this guy off. One of the players committed straight out murder in the streets in front of two city guards in this organization, and you know, they walked over and were able to just pay those guys off to make them turn their back. And then when that came back to haunt them later, it was just a matter of like paying your way up through the levels.
I mean, we're going to have something possibly a bit like that coming up soon in the MERP game I'm running. The party are about to go to Tharbad, and the Thieves of Tharbad supplement for that has got a number of guilds in the city who are operating, some with each other, some against each other, all with extensive networks, different degrees of strength. I'm quite looking forward to running it. It's going to be a challenge, but I'm quite looking forward to running it, because what happens is largely up to player interference, which would be good.
Well, I'm gonna bring up something. You know, we're all talking about a villain, but let's go look at Sauron, which really he did almost nothing the entire series of books. It was all of his minions that did things.
Yeah,
and
it was just he was just there in the east.
Well, the implication was he was guiding things. You know, he commanded Saruman to do what. He wasn't a physical presence, but his influence was definitely there.
Yeah, I mean, there is off-camera stuff too. You know?
Yeah. There is a great, because I'm just rereading Lord of the Rings, but it's a great part at the very end of the first book where Frodo comes up to one of the seats, like the old seats of Numenor, and he actually sits there and looks to the various different directions while he's wearing the ring, and he actually sees the will of Sauron, you know, the absolute masses of orcs moving around, the Haradrims coming over, the Corsairs, you know, basically blocking out to the sea. And just that it's not that Sauron himself is the imposing thing, it's just the reach and the influence that he has and the numbers, the people that he commands.
He's the one getting the pieces moving.
Exactly. He's playing a game that's so much grander than just, you know, armies in himself. It's, you know, it's strategically, you know, encircling his enemy, you know, without them ever knowing. That's
Saruman's a great villain in that, in the fact that he was once the wise leader of the mages, and then he fell from grace, and because he was corrupted.
He was.
And I think he's a great villain, and a sort of villain. Gollum. He is a villain by the stretch by that definition, but he's a villain you have a bit of sympathy for.
He's also a dark reflection. He's also a dark reflection of what happens. Should you have the ring for too long, even just hoarding it away, it has dire consequences, because the ring, at the end of the day, it is not meant for mortal people to really have. It is meant for the immortal elves, like Sauron. It's not really meant for anyone else.
Well, and then I guess not that we're switching a little bit over to corrupting influences. It's Gollum as the villain is a warning of what you will become. It's as much as, and I think that sometimes what we talked about a little bit before is they're when we say these sympathetic characters, they are a warning for players. Don't go down this path. This is what will happen to you. Now, a lot of players that want the power, like, oh, this is so cool, I can do this. And like, well, yes, but sometimes that's one of the reasons I did enjoy Vampire in certain ways, because players would see that humanity drop. It's like, well, wait a minute, this may not be the way to go. And then the more that they tried stopping it, the worse that it became, the more entangled they were in the societies. So even the grandest prince that was supposedly good would lose his humanity over time, as he was just trying to maintain power. Even in some cases trying to do overall good, he was losing who he was in the process.
I'm just going to say, Saxius is starting to flag, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. Right. I'll be heading off now. So, gents, been a lot of fun.
Good night. All right, cheers, Saxius.
See you later.
Yeah. Bye.
So, it hasn't come up yet. What about the environment as a villain?
And what do you mean by that? Are we talking like a Ravenloft or things that are?
It could be the
malicious?
cold Arctic, the cold North. It could be the inhospitable desert. You can play that as a villain, I think, and I kind of have in some games.
I think unless there's a driving force behind the environment, it's just the environment. It's it's a problem, it's an obstacle to overcome, but it's not necessarily a villain.
Well,
it's an opponent. I guess
it's a pretty abstract. I mean, the question is meant to be abstract, because obviously it's not going to be a literal villain, but as like the primary antagonist that the party is having to face for a good stretch of their of the game or the adventure or whatever, I think it can function in a way.
I mean, an obstacle is an obstacle, whether they're fighting it with swords or with water.
It's difficult to pull that off, isn't it, though? Consistently, and to keep it interesting for a long period of time.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's definitely not an endurance villain.
I'm going to say, I think places like Dark Sun, that can apply very well. But I think part of the problem is, and this is the way I felt about 5e versus some of the older stuff, is that it makes many of the environmental dangers trivial. Whereas in the older aspects, they became trivial once you started getting up to 7th or 8th level. But they weren't intended, but the beginning, they were real threats. And that's one of the reasons when you're mentioning it as a villain, I think it's one of those things, if I put an actual physical villain and I separate him by a large amount of space, and they have to travel over, which is what happened with the Lord of the Rings. One does not simply walk into Mordor. Well, they walked in, but it was never simply. Everything was working against them there. And I think there's that aspect.
If you've got the environment, an environment as an opponent can become monotonous after a while. It's hard to keep it interesting. That's what I find. Maybe it's just me.
Villains in general could be hard to keep interesting.
Yeah. Lionel, we've had all sorts of discussions about villains, but I don't think we've actually answered this particular question yet. Is there a villain from your favorite movies or comic books that you've always wanted to bring over into your game and have your party square off against?
I've tried it over the years. It's never worked. It's more interesting to them when it's an enemy appears out of practical gameplay as opposed to me planning. This is a villain they're gonna have to hate. Blah blah blah. And it's like no, the ones that they make themselves are always more engaging.
A really good example would be if you're running. I have run tons of Star Wars in the past, and it's really tempting to have the players run into Darth Vader or Boba Fett. And when they do, first of all, the dice often allow them to fare far better against those guys than they should.
Yeah.
And but also, I'm not James Earl Jones, and I don't have the presence, even at my best, I think, to pull Darth Vader off very well. But my Imperial officers and stuff and gangsters and stuff that I've run before in the game come across really well, but they're not being held against another standard. I think that's always going to be your big enemy. Because, I would love to bring in characters like that, or in doing all the superhero games that I've run. Dr. Doom is great as a villain, but I can't pull that off. That's a performance I'm just not up to the task for.
Part of the problem of bringing in is villains that have been established in the media is you've got the performance of an accomplished actor or artist to live up to as a DM, and we're just amateurs.
Like Dr. Doom, like that dialogue is heavy, and if I don't do the Dr. Doom style dialogue, he's not Dr. Doom.
Work. Yeah, it doesn't work. No.
I'm I don't know. We're talking about this, and I don't know if John, if you've seen Black Cat with it's a 1937 film, I think, with Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff.
Is it based on the Poe story, or is it just something else?
It's about a couple that gets lost, or their car breaks down, basically, and they have to go in the meantime, they're going to be playing for their souls. That's the general aspect to it. But I think one is if you bring in a villain in from somewhere else, either there's too much hype about it, or players kind of feel like, well, he's going to survive just because it's us. And, it's the same reason that anyone that played the Dragonlance modules, you really don't feel like you're playing your characters. Feels like you're playing a role in a movie, and that's not what I do role playing for. Is I do things to see how things would be different. But if you bring in, like we're talking about, like I was mentioning with the Nemesis system, after a while it's hilarious because in the video game, I don't know if you guys have ever played it, that there'll be this one stupid orc that keeps killing you, and they get stronger and stronger, and you're just like, you have to restart for a certain area. And it really does feel like when you finally kill them, it's a real accomplishment. But they're not the main villain in the game. They're a little side character that killed you in the first part, and then he just gets more and more powerful, and you just get madder and madder at him, and it really does form that organic aspect. Now it's okay to have a
they become the villain in the moment.
Yeah, a testimony to the Star Wars problem is that even like the West End Games Writers Guide and their license agreements with the studio is they couldn't even write the main characters into any of their adventures. They had a whole list of named characters they couldn't write into any of them. They had them in their supplements. They did supplements for all the movies that gave you stats, but none of their published adventures had any of the named characters, to the point where they had one module that had an IG series robot, a guy with a stolen set of Mandalorian armor, the same race as Zuckuss, the Grand Findsman, basically all the main bounty hunters. They used a piece of Macquarie concept art, so they looked slightly different, and you run into all these stand-ins for the collection of bounty hunters out of Empire Strikes Back, because they couldn't use the actual ones. So you run into Jodo Cast, who's this Boba Fett wannabe.
The understudy is IG-88.
Exactly.
I'm going to ask you, John, because you've done MERP. Have you ever brought in like the Witch King of Angmar or any of the?
I've never got a game of MERP to the level where I could really incorporate him. I'm currently running 2 games of it, and one character is now within about 3,000 XP of getting to level 2, and that's about as far. Characters have just died too frequently. They're finally getting the hang of. Certainly, my local group are finally getting the hang of avoiding combat where possible, or altering the odds in their favor. The online group have got more of a grasp on how the game is meant to be played, in terms of avoiding straight up fights. But Yeah, I mean, I haven't had a chance. I haven't put the Witch King in ever. No, I would love to.
I have to imagine characters like that might be a little easier to bring in because they're not so well established in terms of characterization and dialogue and stuff.
Yeah.
We get a couple of really strong lines out of the Witch King. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
But the rest of it is like, hey, he's flying around up there on his thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you say favorite movies or comic books. I mean, to be honest, for movies, for me at least, it's always been I like Thulsa Doom so much from the mesmerizations aspect. It's not everything, and the Conan books allow you to use the mesmer ability, and that I find very interesting because he doesn't necessarily have to cast a spell. It's I'll look over at you, and you get the people swaying, and it's the charisma aspect that makes them much more terrifying. Of he's going to rouse you up. Well, a perfect example is if anyone remembers. What was it with the Julius Caesar, where he starts going over and they get everyone to turn against Brutus, and that's to me where you need to bring that in there. Is I like that aspect, especially since it's not a level based system, because most characters are not going to the village is going to come after us, but we're level 7 or 8. I that's one of the reasons I like skill based systems. Is then you go, oh crap, we got like 20 villagers and I might be able to take out only a few of them unless we're planned well. So players at least run away. They can always come back later. But I don't know. When it starts coming back from movies, other than that one, I'm trying. I know that there are a few others I'm trying to think of.
I'd like to drop Great Cthulhu in a D&D game at some point, and see what happens.
Oh, well,
he's not a villain, but I modeled an idiot lord after Zap Brannigan from Futurama.
Oh, geez, yeah.
There you go.
That went over well. The players loved that.
Oh! You know what?
I've been accused of having too many NPCs be Sean Connery.
Yeah.
But,
I was just thinking of the Devil out of the Sandman series.
One of my DMs ran a game where the underworld was run by the Clay twins, 2 intelligent clay golems who were brothers, which was amusing. Obviously based on the Clay twins, but and they had this underworld protection racket going on, which was quite entertaining. But, He used to bring in quite a few sort of references from pop culture, and he played them up. I don't normally go for that sort of thing, but the way he did the voices and the way he I was saying how he hammed them up as well. But it was great fun. I mean, there was a David Bowie knockoff character in there, and all female characters had to make a saving throw versus charm, and all male characters had to make a contested roll against intimidation, because we were put out by his magnetism and the contents of his leather trousers.
The snake in the garden, so to speak.
Yes.
I think those are I think we like taking elements from all of them, but I sometimes like the established, and I'm going to mention Lone Wolf, where they had the Dark Lords. The characters almost will never meet the Dark Lords. It's always achieved. It's the same thing with Sauron. You're not facing Sauron, unless you're in the first age and you cut off his ring. But that's at the final climatic aspect of the battle. I think that's part. But I think that Kurgan is probably my favorite for just having a fun villain that's nearly unkillable, and he just enjoys being evil. Just thoroughly enjoys it.
And I'm going to say now, you're all DMs. How much do you enjoy being evil when you're being a DM? How much do you enjoy that aspect?
I think that might
I
be
love
my
it.
problem.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I love running Call of Cthulhu games and being as twisted as I possibly can. It just feels like such a dirty diversion.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that villains may be one of my weak points is that I'm a really nice guy, and so, or at least I've been told, and, and I don't like.
I have.
And
I've obviously got this little streak in me.
Well, I mean, and I can write Lovecraftian fiction and stuff like that really well, and I can come up with villainous situations. But when it comes to playing the bad guys, I often, I don't know, I hold back, and so I don't think I have as much fun playing them as I could.
Oh, Elfbait, you need to give in to your desires and let yourself go. You know you do.
There's a
You know
reason
you
that I
do.
stopped playing D&D as a player for a long time, because I was like, no matter what I was playing, with a few exceptions, it was always really like good characters. If I could, I'd play paladins and stuff like
I
that.
think
So,
I
Nothing wrong
think
with
if you
that.
give in and let the inner you out, then we could be a good team. Do you not think so?
no.
But see, John, you do that really, really well, and I think that for me, when you're talking about being the villain, it's fun just to release everything. That said, is how do I put this? Truly evil, villainous characters are highly depraved, which is not an area I like to go towards. Um, I'd much rather, like I said, I'd much rather go for the Kurgan where it's like, okay, I don't really care about you, but man, when you start looking at, yeah, well, exactly that kind of characters, exactly
Yeah.
the you get that one. I know The Witcher has several very good villains in it for the series, where you're like, look, I don't want to play a rapist or a pedophile. And those are the kind of characters as a DM I am thrilled when the players kill off.
Yeah,
But
that's why I like playing the very kind of, I don't know, corporate kind of villains and stuff like that, or those are a little easier for me to play. The heavy-handed, because I can be, and
yes,
not, and I don't, the smarmy villain is a really hard play for me. Uncaring, and dismissive, yes. Brutal, yes. Loud and bombastic, yes. But the skeevy villain, man, I have a hard time with the skeevy villain.
For me, it's I like to aim for the performance, villain, hero, whatever. I like when players feel the character is memorable. So I mean, yeah, I get a little joy out of playing a well done villain, but no more or less than any other kind of character.
Yeah.
and
I
I think
will, Lewis. So I will admit here that my answer to that is no. Quite simply, no. I'll play whatever's required.
when she's talking about that is, if you really want to look at the DM as a player, I have to want to play the character as well. And this is sometimes why I like the non-humans, because they are not going to be that really skeevy, I don't want to play a Jeffrey Epstein or Bill Gates. I mean, they're just as slimy as can be. I'd much rather play a Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping or, this sounds horrible, but it's a lot easier to play the dictator, and you get up and you start doing off, your grand speeches and everything, than playing off the child rapist in the background. I'm like, that's manipulating everything. I'm like, no.
Speaking of dictators, you should have seen like our Sunday. So the local convention back in Washington, board game convention, we'd go every year, and it was always finished off with a Sunday morning when everybody's shutting down, a big game of Junta. I don't know if you've ever played Junta. It is the board game of Banana Republic politics, and one character is El Presidente, and now everybody else takes the place of one of his cabinet members. And you want to talk about just hamming it up as villains. The group had been doing it for so many years. We had fake mustaches and cigars and big hats and everything like that we would wear while we played it. But yeah, everybody's a villain. And everybody just hams it up for that one.
On the topic of Larissa's question there, I mean, I think, there's no type of villain that I'd refuse to play, but there are certain things I won't depict. Like you might have a pedophile in the game, but I'm not going to describe any of that, and then nothing will be portrayed on screen. I have sort of a PG-13 baseline, right?
With the
there is a way to do it. There is a way to portray it.
With the smarmy villains, I'll show the results, not the acts often.
Or if it's something really depraved, something the players have heard about this character, but they're not going to see it firsthand.
The
person recounting it just can't say exactly because it was so horrible.
So the worst of it, as you say, goes on in the background. You fade that to black if necessary.
Fade to black off screen.
I want to say the 1930s in some ways, where if you are actually really aware, you can notice a lot of those films. A perfect example, has anyone seen The Letter M? Or is it M? It's just the movie M. Where you look films. It's
possibly
it's the bug-eyed guy that was in Casablanca. If anyone
Peter Lorre.
Yeah, Peter Lorre, he's a child killer, and they everything is fade off to black. You know what's going on. It is very creepy from that aspect, and he plays a little bit without being overt. But basically, the Thieves Guild of the city is hunting him down because they've made their life so miserable because the police are they're cracking down on all the criminals to try to stop this. And at the end, he gets tried by basically the Thieves Guild is what it comes down to. But
that's kind of cool.
It's an excellent film. It's in German, but it's truly. But not everything has to be necessarily up front. But because there's that stuff in the background, you don't have to show it. You really do get a feel like people. And that's one of the things I like about when we're talking about this. Am I willing to play that a little bit? But I want everything in the background so the players know that there's something horrible. And only maybe at the end we'll describe, like he was talking about the bones of, children or something, but they don't need to see that. I think that's one of the things. And I think a lot of it works that way is, okay, yes, the so-and-so was raped. Okay, this is where it goes over. And that depends on the type of game you're playing. Most of the time I like to play a PG-13 Lord of the Rings style game. But if you're playing into like a Call of Cthulhu or something like that, then you're going to get into some of those darker elements where you're going, some of these people are truly depraved, and you really have to.
You have to tread that line quite carefully.
I would argue that you don't have to have that to have a good Call of Cthulhu game, because a lot of the source fiction dodges that stuff pretty well too. So
hints of it, though.
Yeah,
there were hints.
Exactly. I mean, but it's just like everything else. It's all unspeakable, unknowable, undescribable.
The other thing he did is sometimes people want to go into it and talk about just all the graphic detail. But my favorite line of Call of Cthulhu, and by Lovecraft it was eating his head like a candy cane.
Yeah, which is kind of a silly line if you think about it, but it says a lot.
It's. I mean, your mind just goes on all sorts of different directions. I don't have to describe it any better than that. You're just
and because everybody eats a candy cane differently. Is he like swiveling his head till it's a sharp little point, or or is he licking it lewdly, or what's he doing?
But you don't have to describe it. But that's
again unspeakable and noble. That's why I love all these arguments.
Crunching away, breaking his teeth.
Everybody's like, I want to see Call of Cthulhu on the screen. I'm like, no, you don't, because it'll suck. No matter how good it is, everybody will look at it and go, "That's not what I imagined." And also, if you look at some of the descriptions of things, they would just look ridiculous on screen.
I'm going to bring this up. If you want to see that, go watch South Park. It has the best representation of Cthulhu, and with Mysterion. No, but the other part is, Cthulhu himself is so big and massive. It doesn't really. It's like adding a horror film and then suddenly bringing in Godzilla.
I mean, I think one of the best interpretations of Cthulhu in a film, if we're talking about it, is in the movie Underwater. If you've ever seen that one.
I have not.
Science fiction survival horror in a deep sea environment. Yeah, it's cool. It may be a bit of a spoiler for the movie, but it's been out long enough, so if you haven't watched it yet, not my fault.
Have some of the stuff for the Outer Limits when they were doing the 90s version, which to be fair, that's kind of the when the forget me not aspect, where you start mutating and things like that, and the question is, how do you stop it? It's the slow stuff, and actually I think that's one of the things that helped with Warhammer Fantasy, DCC, some of these others, is it's a slow warp and corruption of your character over time, which is what Cthulhu does so well as a game system.
But if you're talking about things like Shoggoths and stuff, and you look at the actual descriptions, I'm like, they're going to look stupid on screen. It's a big mass of fleshy bubbles with tentacles. It's like, and mouths and eyes. It's really hard to make that not look ridiculous when you're trying, especially when you're trying to be scary.
And I think some of it comes down to, if anyone remembers talking about artwork, look at the Beholder in first edition, and then look at the on fifth edition. There's a big difference between what would scare characters. At least the fifth edition one actually says
knowledge of what the Beholder does should scare you. But
the thing is, I would say though the fifth edition ones still aren't scary. They're just monstrous. I've seen a couple of artistic renditions of Beholders where they truly leaned into the cosmic horror aspect. And those were terrifying. There was one artist. He's got a YouTube channel where he redraws monsters, and his actually had a single eye that has like little spidery legs coming out of it, and where it's like it's more unspeakable, unknowable, than just an eyeball with eye stalks.
Just get a drink. Just bear with me a minute.
No, it's fine.
Sure. Speaking of villains, let's talk about dragons. If you actually look at the size and everything, but players are not that afraid of dragons when you look at them. But when you think
we're all raised on dinosaurs, and all a dragon is a dinosaur with wings.
Who breathes fire and casts spells and can talk to you.
But those aren't particularly horrifying or terrifying, because that's just spell casting away from Godzilla.
Well, here's the thing: is we kind of just shrug that off, but anyone that's actually been near a bear or an animal, which is only 500 to 1,000 pounds, and now you're getting a dragon that's probably in the 12 to 20 tons.
I know dragons in real life would be terrifying and stuff, but I think it's easy for us to reframe them in our distanced mind and not be scared of them, because they've been the songs of folk. They've been the subject of folk music. They've they've been H.R. Puffin stuff. They've been Falkor. One of the scariest dragons in all of cinema, as far as depictions, is Vermithrax Pejorative from Dragon Slayer.
Dragon Slayer, yeah.
Yeah, he is just I should say, because she lays eggs. Is just, I love the jaw. How basically they jaws the dragon. You get little bits, and the dragon is off camera for a good chunk of it. And then you start seeing little bits, and they do POV shots from the dragon's point of view. And then when you finally see the dragon, that dragon still stands up today.
Still looks good. I know. I got the DVD a couple years back.
That's a movie I watch every year.
I'm too cheap to buy an episode for it, but no, whether it's Smog or anything else, these are truly terrifying animals that make great villains. Speaking of villains, Smog is a great villain. And part of it is that I like the villains to be likable as charming, but I like the players to hate them so much. So it's the villains that you hate, or that you love to hate, and then when they're gone, the players feel like, they're all happy they killed them, and they went, oh, nothing will be that great again.
When a first ed game came back after the pandemic started winding down and people could meet up again, I threw the plot thread of a baby dragon. There was the layer of a baby, a level 1, hatchling dragon, and this is the group had just come back, so they were all level 1 characters. Like, oh, we can take that, no problem. And even though it's first ed dragons are, compared to other editions, a little on the weaker side, but players shouldn't think that makes them weak. And it was so funny. They went in, fight this 8 hit point hatchling green dragon, and it basically ripped half the group to shreds before they finally got it. It was great. They will never underestimate dragons again in my campaign.
Oh, people forget that even the lower level dragons, especially for basic, and I know you're playing OSE.
This particular game was advanced AD&D.
Okay. But I mean, even when you look at the OSE dragons, they only have like 30 something odd hit points. That will character wipe a party. I mean,
that's a lot in OSE. Yeah.
I mean, they'll TPK a lot of parties, and they can breathe 3 times. Holy crap! Okay, we take out the mage. Boom. Okay, the fighter takes. It's usually in the forefront for it, and now you're like,
you should fear dragons, absolutely. And one thing I do is, I don't know if you've read the Forgotten Realms box set, the gray box set, and how they adjust first edition dragons. But it's really good if you want to beef up dragons.
Been a while, yeah.
Kryn did that too. I know that they did theirs. I think they poured all the stuff they did in Kryn over to Forgotten Realms, didn't they?
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know the Kryn one, but I'll tell you what they did in Forgotten Realms, and you can tell me how close it is. So the first thing they did is they changed the breath weapon. So instead of 3 per day at equal to your hit points, they have a pool of triple the hit points that they can disperse however they want. So, if a dragon has 120 hit points, they can blow it all in 120 hit point blast, or 120 1-point blasts, or anything in between. So I don't know if they did that in Kryn, but
that was Dragonlance. Yeah, they did that in Dragonlance.
Yeah. So, and the other thing that they did was, if the dragon is outnumbered, you can double its physical number of attacks per round.
Oh, interesting. I remember that they really beefed up dragons for that. And then I remember, but
some good Dragon magazine articles too that talked about like having dragons use the items in their treasure hoard.
Yeah, absolutely. that gets into, you got to play the intelligence of the dragons. And now this was a green one. In green, AD&D green dragons are average. So average human intellect. They're not the geniuses.
Aren't the black dragons the dumbest ones?
I think so.
Wasn't it white dragons the dumbest?
Maybe. I think white dragons may be the dumbest. Yeah,
they're the dumbest ones. Black ones aren't particularly clever either. But the green ones, they're described as being tricksters and duplicitous, aren't they? There.
What about we're talking about this, but talking about villains, which I never really liked them, was and I know Shadowrun loved to use the dragons as their main forces behind the world. And
in Shadowrun, they take the place of the high corporate kind of.
But they're always the movers and shakers. The saying in Dragon in Shadowrun was never deal with the dragon.
Yeah, because Dunkel's on.
Well,
it's the dragon at the head of the big corporation in Seattle, and there.
Well, then he became president, and there's several different. then he died.
He was Lex Luthor in dragon form.
Well, and some of the other ones I liked reading about were about the other ones, but sometimes I feel that those have become so powerful that they're not as interesting to me to be a villain. Because I like my villains. I like the players to get to the point where they feel that they can actually take on the villain, so then I can get the final. How do I want to put it? All of us have probably watched kung fu films where they finally fight the grandmaster. Villain. That's where I like the players to be at the end.
Wax on, wax off. Yes.
I'm running my current 5th edition campaign. I'm running where there's only one of each kind of dragon. There's like the red dragon, the white dragon, and they're all in this world between they're all ancient, and like there are other forms of dragon kind. And this is an excuse to use other forms of dragon kind all the time. Like there are wyverns and drakes and, other things. But yeah, there's like a red dragon. And in the current game, like they make sure that they're the only one because it's sort of there can be only one sort of a thing.
Well, I know anyone that's looked at the dragons for Iron Kingdoms. They're not natural. They corrupt everything, and each of them has their own ability, but very similar. They're not They're not like dragons that we would normally think of.
That's why I love the Linorms, the Norse dragons. They had a great dragon magazine and set up a series of articles on them. And like, if you ever want to swap out some dragons, throw Linorms in there and like watch people.
They've got them in second edition, and they're interesting.
Yeah.
Weren't they the ones without wings? I remember.
No, well, they don't have wings, but the not having wings was a thing that was not specific to Linorms either, because I think there's a couple of the later chromatic dragons and stuff that didn't have wings or something like that.
K5K's got a nice little comment there about showing the carnage of dragons.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's where dragon.
That's with any powerful monster.
Yeah.
I think one of my favorite moments was in that campaign with the Fallen Kingdom. There were no dragons in the world, supposedly. The High Kings of the Fallen Empire had basically killed them, hunted them all, killed them, and eaten them because they ate them for their power, right? It was like, that was the big royal things. That it basically hunted the dragons to extinction. And when I had the party adventuring across country and they saw just as far as the eye could see, like charred and mangled livestock, and they realized there's only one thing that could do this. Yeah.
So John, I'm going to ask you, because I'm not sure if you're still playing with the same group of characters after your what do I want to call it, the U1 to U3. After U3, are you going to be using any more Sahagwin or anything to come back at some point against these players?
I don't know. I've paused that game for a little while to play a bit of MERP in the same slot. So it's at the moment it's suck it and see. I wanted to run a little bit of MERP online.
Sure.
So we've been through 4 modules with that group. They've all got to about 5th level. The characters are there to be used again if need be. I don't know what to do with them next. It's a case of we shall see.
I was just thinking, because we're talking about villains, that seems to be perfect for a group that because they've actually made enemies of the Sahagwin here.
Yes.
Or Sahagwin, I don't know how you pronounce it.
Sologin.
So, but yeah, that to me would be really. Oh, we lost Sean.
No, I'm still here. We lost Elfbait.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Elfbait. Sorry about that. No, I think that would be, talk about the things that come back later. And we're going to talk about villains. I have to admit, my favorite villain from a lot of the movies that recurred later was Wrath of Khan, because he was from the original series and they brought the same actor back, 10 plus years later as the villain. And, you could see what happened to him. And I think that's one of those things that players forget about this one character. And then it comes back much, much later. And where did he come from? And those callbacks, I think, really add something to it, because it doesn't always have to be the most powerful. In a level-based system, it matters more. But
what made Khan such a great villain, though, on that topic isn't just that he was relentless or anything like that, not his traits, but the fact that from a writing standpoint, everything about him was baked so much into the story they were telling, the themes of the story, as well as the history of the character. And that's what made it interesting. And it's like every attempt to recreate that has failed because the writers have failed to grasp that Khan was so thematically relevant to everything that was going on. And that's a hard thing to do in a role-playing game.
He was also flawed. That was the other aspect. Is he was known for being highly intelligent, very strong, and everything else. And I think this is why it failed in the newer version, was that he was a man of passion, and that blinded him in certain cases. And actually, it nearly blinded Kirk as well.
Exactly.
But remember when they're fighting, and he says, "Oh, he has 2-dimensional thinking instead of 3-dimensional thinking while they're fighting in space."
Yeah,
I mean, that makes a difference. I think by having those flaws in your villains, it makes them interesting too, because players can exploit them.
I saw that film when it first came out. I must have been 10 or 11 years old, and I've never seen it since. So I can't remember anything about it.
Oh, you should rewatch it. There's a reason it's regarded as the best of the Star Trek films. because it's just a well done story. It's not just, oh, it's exciting because it's Star Trek and there's action, but it's a well told story. And
I was 10 or 11, so I enjoyed it because it was action. I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I love Ricardo Montalban as an actor. I think that also helped. When we talk about hamming it up, I mean, there was no, and to be fair, whether it's Jack Nicholson or James Earl Jones or I never remember his name. Anyway, Rickman, all these guys, they don't hold back. They go over the top, which makes it much more memorable. And if a hero does it, it's too much. But when the villain does it, you're like, oh, this is so great.
Well, it's about knowing when to go over the top. Like, okay, let's look at Deadpool. Deadpool's over the top as a hero, but it works. Whereas certain other characters, it wouldn't. You got John McClane from Die Hard. He's got to be the everyman, right? So he goes as over the top as he can within the context of who that person is. And that's why John McClane is memorable. But yeah, like Alan Rickman, classically trained, he knows when to push the right buttons. He knows how to play over the top, but he also knows how to pull it back so that it's not too far. And I think Montalban, what's funny about, of course, the character of Khan is he's supposed to be Sikh. They painted him darker skinned in the original show in Space Seed, but they didn't bother with any of that in Wrath of Khan. But the character is supposed to be Sikh, not Spanish.
Okay, I just took it. Yeah, I took it as more a title than anything else. But yeah, but I mean that's what I love about those is go with it all the way, and especially when you look at Khan, it's him, it's Moby Dick and the Captain Ahab.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't care. We're going for it no matter what. And
as a DM, I like to ham up NPCs. No matter what, whether they're good, bad, or whatever. I mean, that's just the way I tend to run things. But
as a DM, you can do that because it's limited.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I mean is, it would be awfully tiring to have to deal with this 4 hours straight of the same person doing it. You're like, could you just knock it off?
Yeah.
It's fine in small moments, but not everything needs to be overacted all the time. But that's to me, it's the fun part.
There's Elfbait.
Yeah.
I hit the wrong button.
And
I think we're losing John. I keep seeing him nod off there.
I'm going to ask you a quick question, John. For your non-human villains and non-humanoid villains, what are your favorite?
My favorite villains, devils. It's a simple answer. I love that. Devils across all editions, all games. I like their scheming. I like the way. I just like the way they're portrayed. I like the hierarchy they have, the powers they have. I like the way they look. I like everything about them. I think they make for great enemies. And if you can get a devil or something that's related to a devil as an enemy, even just for a simple scenario, that I think I enjoy it. I like it. And if I had a favorite devil,
the succubus? No.
I quite like the Irides.
The
Irides, yeah.
Why did I know you were going to say that?
Yeah, I like the Irides. I think I like the whole image of them. Yes, I definitely like to throw sort of because all my group currently are all blokes, so I like to throw in the evil, alluring female who is clearly nasty.
Back in the day, I had so many of those, especially homebrew, that the term Eli women came to be a thing in our games. I mean, yes, I've grown up and matured, but back then I'm like, and my friend's like, how come there's so many horrible female monsters in your campaign? I'm like, women are more fun to draw. And that was literally it. So many of my monsters would be like, I would draw something and then I'd come up with a monster for it. even in comic book art and other character art and stuff, I always had way more fun coming up with costumes and just all of that for female characters than I would for male characters. It's like male, what do you got for clothes? Pants, shirts.
Yeah.
I still like the second edition Greater Medusa, which I, of course, took directly from the 1981 Clash.
The Clash of the Titans, yeah.
But I still love that as a villain because they have high intelligence. They're very tough, and players can't look at them directly. So.
And again, it's a female villain. There's something about female villains.
Still wish they would have kept the age category undead that they had in the Ravenloft box set, where you had vampires that had age categories and mummies that had age categories like dragons, and they got more powerful as they went up.
I actually think that I like the mummies better than I did the vampires in the old Ravenloft.
The whole concept, though, of those ancient undead getting more powerful as they got older was just perfect.
Yeah, the 1,000-year vampire charms at will. They don't even make eye contact. You just got to be near it.
Exactly. I can't remember if they did that with any other monsters. I just remember specifically the mummy and the vampire.
I don't remember.
I did make a monster that was a house. It was a haunted house monster that actually had an age category.
And I think for Ravenloft is because by that time I had started moving over towards Vampire the Masquerade, and I did like that aspect that they had. I'm not sure if they stole it or not because it came out around the same time frame. But I liked the greater mummies as they got older, because I felt mummies were such a. I actually felt this a lot about the undead, is they were just kind of sad tropes, and by making them stronger, it really made them a lot more interesting. And couldn't they cast spells and things? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think
greater mummies.
Yeah, I think that Ravenloft was really trying to break with the Universal Monsters trope that most of the undead in D&D were built around, or those early signature undead.
I think that they had their aspects in there, but I really did think that, I hate saying this because so many of the monsters are great when you look at them, but they're so overused in all the modules and games. They become more trivial than that. And I think that's one of the big weaknesses, at least in D&D, is having these great villains. You can't use them over and over again. You have to swap them out.
Well, you see that even in the published modules, though, because you see them start to play with that lizard man vampire, mummy centaur, was one vampire chick that everybody dies to in Sojkanth. Just because they look at that picture and they're like, "Oh, she's hot. I'm going to go in and say hi."
Yes.
Oh,
well, I mean, Omanel, you hate level drain, right? I mean, I understand.
I've despised level drain,
but
I like level drain.
But what I like is I would rather it be done. And to anyone that
Power gamer.
Well, have you ever looked at the Blood King? Or I think it's the OSC module.
I haven't.
No, I haven't gotten it yet. It's coming with the shipment, right?
Well, yes. I don't know if you got it with it's coming if you bought all of the
Yeah, I have the PDF, but I haven't read it. I don't generally read modules until I'm either ready to run them, just in case I end up playing them. But,
so at the beginning part of it, they give different options if you don't want to use the
Spoiler
level.
warning. No.
well, no, but at the beginning it says that you, besides level drain, you can use these things, and I like that aspect better, in that I can select that part.
Well, the reason I brought it up was I didn't want to get on a level drain tangent. Was D&D monsters that are level draining should be rare. Like they're special. I like using them because they should be terrifying, but I'm not throwing wave after wave of whites and wraiths at my players. It'd be like there might be a white in a crypt every once in a while.
Now shadows, on the other hand, their take on the draining, where they drain strength instead.
Strength, yeah.
But shadows are one of the, if I recall, even in AD&D, you could hurt them. Like
nope, they require I think magic or silver. Magic for sure. Silver, I'm not sure offhand, but.
And see, I like that because it will drain the characters over time, but they can regain some of the health once they're dead. And that's why I didn't like it. But I do like the fact that you can start. Well, the other thing is it just felt weird. Like, oh, the level drain's what kills your characters, not the damage. Unless there's something really weird.
Well, it'll be both.
I didn't. I mean, I'll admit now, I didn't mind 5th edition's take on it, where they drain hit points from the hit maximum. Hit points,
yeah.
But I didn't like how easy it was to recover from it. So
a night's rest.
Yeah, I added the caveat that you can only recover on that night's rest if you have killed the specific undead creature that drained you. If the creature is intelligent and gets away, you've got to hunt it down.
I suppose some of the source media kind of even supports that, because how many vampire movies have we seen where they killed the master vampire? Everybody's better.
The bloodline, yeah. Exactly.
Everybody's better.
But see, what gets me about it is, and I'm, a problem was that I'd read Dracula, the actual book, when I was a kid, and I went, well, wait a minute, she's not high level. And she's becoming weaker, and it's only when they can kill it does it allow the health to be regained. And I agree. And
that's
that
why 5th edition ones should do exhaustion.
I wouldn't mind. I love exhaustion.
It's the rule that they should use more, and they never do.
Well,
but I've said that several times, so I won't say it again.
And it's like they're afraid to use it. You put it in there, and you never use the rule. How can you do that?
I've made monsters now that specifically use exhaustion.
Well, I'm thinking if actually,
I also have magic items that like inflict exhaustion that on the guys using them too.
I do like, and let's see, and I like to bring these up because I do like the Monsternomicon for Iron Kingdoms, because it allows you to add so many different things to your templates, so you can change your monster up very easily. And now I don't know what it is in the 5e version, but I'm using the old Iron Hordes and War Machine rules. But like for the Spectres, they can get pretty scary for a lot of things. And it's like, oh, okay, well, what do you get? And each one becomes unique. I think that's the other aspect. Is I really wish that they would allow some of these things to become unique. Corrodes touch. It corrodes living tissue and metal, so you can almost get the effect very similar to a rust monster.
I think John's giving us a hint here.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
It's not a Thanksgiving reference, is it?
Once again, we have reached pumpkin time. The time when I turn from a almost living old man into a sleeping corpse. We've hit midnight once again, and once again we've had a highly entertaining discussion. Covered all manner of different villain types and ways in which to use villains, and Elfbait's disappeared to do some work.
I'm gonna ask you a quick question.
Yeah.
Sean,
I'm still here.
When's your next video coming out?
Which
Did
video?
you say Sean or John?
Sean, Mage's Musings.
Quit pressuring the man. Puppets
I've got a little bit of a
fast.
snag this week, so I'm a little behind, but hopefully soon.
It's been 8 days since the last one. I did.
You've been counting. Nice.
Yeah,
No pressure.
I had a look. I had a look today and thought, oh, it's been 8 days since the last one.
Yeah, no. Well, I had a busy weekend, and like I said, some technical issues in terms of capturing video. So, but I'll get back to it soon.
Yeah.
We're just teasing you for that, but I mean, I actually do enjoy watching your stuff and how you go through, and the minis make it for me. So when you hit that 1K, you got to give away the order the stick mini.
I thought about that. I saw your note there. I'm like, I might do that. I'll print up some stuff on some nice card stock and and give entire booklets away. It's like, yeah, that could be my 1,000. I'm still 400 away from that, so I've got a while ago. I kind of plateaued in my growth, so I got time to think about it.
Thankfully, my plateau happened when I got into the 900s, so it just took ages to crawl to the 1,000.
To crawl, yeah.
But yeah, it happens. I had the sort of sudden surge from about 300 to 700, and oh wow, where will they come from? but yeah, it has. We have come to the time when I do need to retire, switch the light out, let my family sleep, and so on. So once again, I want to say thank you to everyone who has contributed towards this stream. Firstly, to Saxius and DK, who've been and gone. Saxius, who suggests our topics and then dives in headlong, and he is the consummate villain. He has the accent, he has the demeanor, and as we saw earlier, when he takes his glasses off, he's properly scary. I say thank you to Elfbait, as always. I thought we weren't going to have you tonight because you were clearly suffering a little earlier, but you've lasted. You've got the stamina to see it through.
I'm flagging, but
and Sean, Major's Musing's been with us throughout again. Nice to have your input again. Always welcome.
Ramble on about D&D? No, anytime. Yeah,
that's kind of an easy one.
And Omanal joined us midstream and gave us his usual entertaining input. So thank you, Omanal, for contributing once again, and everybody in chat, especially Hungar, who was very generous early on. He's almost single-handedly buying me new stuff at the moment, which is marvelous. So Hungar, if you're still there, I don't know if you are still there because you're in hospital at the moment. Hope it all gets sorted and you get out of hospital again. I know you spent far too long in there than is good, but fingers crossed for you. Hope it all gets sorted. Thank you everyone else who's been in chat. Thank you for all the contributions. They've been great. But for tonight, I'm off. I'm off to my beddy boys.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Good night.
So John, what are you going to buy with your newfound wealth?
I don't know. I don't know yet. We shall see. We shall see.
Make a video.